lizard.
Yeah.
But
Okay,
Owen?
good to go.
Old farts.
Good afternoon. It's April 27th. It's 3 o'clock, and we'll call the Shasta Regional Transportation meeting to order. Start with the pledge. You would? And Mr. Watkins, would you lead us?
I could do that, but I have to take my hat off.
Okay.
Ready, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Teagan, would you do the staff introductions, please?
I think we need to go with roll call first, Chair.
Yeah, you're right, we do. It's right there. Ready, Amy?
Let me let somebody in. Hang on. John, head on back.
How you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
Good.
All right, everybody. We've got John Kenny coming in. Good afternoon, board members, partner agencies, and members of the public. We'll start with a roll call. Board member Audette.
Here.
Board member Gallagher.
Here.
Board member Garmin.
Here.
Board member Jones.
Here.
Board member Kellstrom.
Here.
Board member Mazzano.
Here.
And board member Watkins.
Present.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
Now, Mr. Teagan, you're on.
All right, we'll go ahead and do staff introductions. Good afternoon, Chair Mazzano on board, Sean Teagan, Executive Director. Here with it to my left is our Chief Fiscal Officer, Jessica Carlson. Online, we have our Administrative Associate, Amy Lindsay, as well as Michael Cooker, who's helping run this meeting, so we're staying nice and efficient. Here and also Keith Williams, Senior Transportation Planner, is online as well today. Here in the rest of staff in the office, we have Senior Transportation Planner Jennifer Pollum. We have Associate Transportation Planner Mehdi Monandini. And I think that is it for today.
Eddie.
Thank you. Public comment. Amy, do we have anybody online? I can't hear.
Sorry about that. We do not.
Okay, I'll read it anyway. Public comment period. This is a time set aside for citizens to address the board on consent agenda items or matters not on the agenda within the jurisdiction of the board. By law, the board cannot discuss or take action on matters not on the agenda, but may schedule an item for a future meeting. And the consent calendar before us, is there any discussion from the board?
I had a couple things on the
Anybody
consent.
here want to talk in public comment?
Oh, good question.
Anybody out there? Look like they're all staff, but public. Want to comment? You're public. What would you like to talk about?
It's on the agenda, so I'm eagerly waiting to hear.
All right.
I did have a couple things. One, I just wanted, as I was sharing with Chair, Board of Supervisors Chair Jones prior to the meeting, last meeting, Mr. Newts was commenting that, you know, we want more money for roads leading into Anderson, and Chair Jones said correctly, we are getting our fair share of funds in Anderson, but I don't think, my point would be that I don't believe any of our jurisdictions are receiving enough money for our roadways. I think we're all scrambling for a small piece of the pie, and that's a little frustrating. I just wanted to clarify that. And then items 5.5 and 5.6, I don't know if you want to pull them.
You want to discuss them?
You can discuss it without pulling. Ask a question. Your choice.
Yeah, 5.5, there's a comment in there, an increasingly common mode of daily transportation for the bicycle thing. I'm not sure I agree with that statement. I think we'd like it to be an increasingly common mode of daily transportation, but I'd like to see some more stats on that one.
Pull it off? I'll pull it off.
You could pull it off and go ahead and do 5.6 and we'll talk about that.
Amy, we're going to pull 5.5 and 5.6 off of the consent calendar. We'll move them to the regular calendar. What numbers do you want to make them?
Chair, do you want to go ahead and approve the rest of the consent agenda first, and then we can move each of those items?
I move we approve the rest of the consent agenda.
Second.
All right, Amy, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None, motion carries unanimous. Number 6.
Okay.
Okay, that's done. Into the regular calendar. 5. Okay, we'll move to the regular calendar.
No, I think we should do 5-5 since Mike. Oh, you're going to just say that's on the regular calendar.
Yeah.
Okay, it really not, but it's just been pulled to discuss separately.
Right.
It would end up being the first item on the regular calendar, I think. So that,
That's usually how we do it. I pull it out, we'll put it on the regular calendar and talk about it. First one.
yeah, I mean, I read the resolution and, are we on that one, Chair?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Yes.
I did. I would be happy to take the floor, but I didn't want to
You got it.
rude there. So, I understand, I think the struggle I have with some of that language is I get why we get the money to build downtown projects and all that through building bike lanes. And I understand that that's how the state is forcing us to grapple for the money with bike lanes and all that. But there's a part of me that just would like, show me better facts than what's in the, and I'm happy to change my tune if presented with some data. Statements are not data, and creating a bicycle-friendly community has been shown to improve citizens' health, well-being, and quality of life. But the fact of the matter is, in this area, you probably don't have a subset of people large enough to actually make some of those statements who actually ride their bike to work every day. And there's a lot of days during the year that we wouldn't get any data from them because they're not going to get on their bicycle and ride in the snowmageddon, right? They're going to get in their car and they're going to drive on the road. So I guess there's a part of me would just like use different language or show me some hard information, some hard data that shows that we're increasingly common to ride our bicycles around Reading, because I see the lanes, I drive through them when I have to merge into the turn lane to get onto the freeway, but I'm not seeing bicycles in that lane. That's the facts.
Mr. Teagan, on that part, on the discussion, I mean, some of those things I could agree with, and this is just a resolution to approve, May 2023 as Bike Month, but I would agree in an a common mode of daily transportation that I don't see. Now, popular method of recreation, I do. And important for tourism, I could agree with that. So wouldn't it just be as easy to change the word of a common mode of daily transportation? Because that really, I don't think any of us see that.
Well, so in terms of data, yes, we can provide some additional data to share and to talk about that in terms of resolution. I would say though, when you look at it as a general statement in the region or across the state or across the country, we are seeing that bike activity and bicycle transportation, those considering to use it, it is becoming, I'll bet, slowly in certain areas and more aggressively in other areas, and increasing mode of transportation. I would.
This is specific to Shasta County, though.
Yes, but I would also argue as well, it's not only an increasing mode of daily transportation, and if you want to loop in microtransit, for example, with e-bike scooters and others, where we've heard from the local vendor that they have what they call a set of commuters that would kind of fit in the same category that use the same facilities, you have those. But it is one of the factors that we have to look at when we design our streets and roads and we look our facilities, we are supposed to be multimodal. We have to consider all modes of all transportation for all users across the board. And sometimes we're going to be planning for facilities based upon growth that's going to take place. Does that mean you're going to see it that, one day the project's there, the next day the project, one day the project's there, not there, and the next day it is, and boom, you're going to have all these people using it? Not necessarily.
How about just remove the word common?
Can I get a point of clarification?
Go
Is
ahead.
that, I don't know that that's, I know that's on our summary of the front, but is that, I don't see that actually on the resolution,
It's just a part of the discussion.
just the discussion. So is there part of the actual resolution that we would pass that you're uncomfortable with? Because it doesn't actually say that in the resolution part. So is there specifically something in the resolution that you'd want to change? I feel like it focused a little more on recreation on the actual resolution.
Mr. Watkins?
I think the bottom line here is we take, 2% of our gas tax money, and we, as SRTA, directs that money to improve bike lanes and to create trails and bicycle transportation to enhance it. So really the question is, does this resolution do anything to affect funding in the future for bike lanes and projects?
No, this doesn't affect anything. This is essentially just a thing that proclaiming that we're recognizing May as Bike Month, which is being recognized across the entire country in terms of activities. We are promoting it. We're encouraging folks to get out and use their bikes and hope that they would start to use the facilities, become more comfortable with them, and working with various other partners across the region that do education and other activities.
So, Sean-
Highlighting Bike Month.
So in the future, when we're doing a budget, and maybe Mike then would want to question how appropriate is it to take some of that fund and divert it to increase bicycle use if it's not really happening. He would like to see data to see how we've been effective with our money.
Yeah.
And that we can also talk about as part of the regional transportation plan and what information's gone into that to see what have been kind of the trend in the area. And it always fluctuates all the time of what we see take place.
I think that the staff report and the discussion is just that, it's discussion. It's an introduction for the resolution. It doesn't lock us into anything. And I would say that you might not see bicycle riders commuting to work, but if you go down to that bicycle shop there on South Market here, he's renting them electric bikes all day long. And not only do we have the bicyclists out there, we've got those scooters out there. And that's another mode of transportation. And you see some of them, there's a young man in our new pallet shelter program that's got a collapsible one with lights on it. And that's how he's getting around. So maybe you don't see them like we do in the metropolitan areas where everybody's there and that's how they're getting around. It's a little harder up here. I agree with you. If it's snowing or if it's 110 degrees, but if that's your only mode of transportation, you're gonna have to suck it up and do it. And to encourage it and to promote it along with the rest of the country during the month of May, I think is a good thing.
And I'm fine with voting for the resolution, but I think language is super important, and there's an agenda behind everything that we do and say, and I'm not for the agenda. So that's why I'm bringing it up.
Okay. What language do you want to change in the resolution?
I would increasingly common. I would pull some of that language out of there because I just don't believe it.
It's just an error.
But that's just in the staff report.
Yeah, you really, there's probably nothing in the actual resolution.
If I
So-
may, what the board is acting on is the resolution.
Exactly.
Right.
And I was,
Well, what we're being sold on is the discussion. So that's my point.
okay, all right.
So I think we've discussed it enough. I make a motion to pass the resolution as is.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
So I voted for that resolution, just for the record. Just so the world knows that.
Passes unanimously.
It's not against.
Excuse me. Chair Mazzano? Chair Mazzano, can you
Yes.
please, when we're passing motions, can you make sure you repeat who the first and the second is?
Watkins was second.
Watkins is second, and Mr. Kellstrom is first.
Thank you.
I know better, I should have. All right, let's move on to 5-6. Mr. Gallagher?
It just seemed, speaking of resolutions, let me grab, it just seemed like in the resolution, The now therefore be it resolved that SRTA hereby approves, or is it the SRTA Board of Directors? That seems minor, but it seems like that's a typo in there. Does the Board of Directors pass the resolution or does SRTA? Are you tracking with me? Yeah.
Well, the Board of Directors, so the last line says pass and adopt to this 27th day by the Board of Directors of Shasta Regional Transportation.
Okay,
So it's one and the same.
it is the same.
You are CERTA.
We are SRTA. Thank you.
Yes.
I'll make the motion to approve.
I'll second.
Amy, did you get that, Mr. Gallagher? We already did.
No, we didn't.
I just moved it.
Oh, 5-6, I'm sorry. Moving on.
First
Mr.
was
Gallagher made
Gallagher.
the first. Chris, did you do the second? And Mr. Kellstrom on the second.
Great, thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Okay, Sean. 5-7.
No, five,
Item
was approved, we have CERTA on it, number 6.
6. I got it in order here.
I know.
Thank you, Chair. There are a few different updates I'd like to provide to the Board of Directors today. One, in terms of staffing, we're now working on filling a couple of planner positions. We recently had completed some interviews with some applicants and are going through the necessary steps to hire 2 individuals. So I'm hoping we'll be able to complete that effort and be able to introduce those folks to you at the June board meeting. In terms of funding, on March 24th, received notification from Congressman LaMalfa's office that SRTA was awarded $3 million in federal community project funding. That is various community project funding is earmarked funding in the federal transportation bill or the federal congressional bill. It involves different categories such as transportation, infrastructure, housing, health and human services. There's certain budgets that are allotted to federal members in Congress that they can then solicit for project ideas from folks in their jurisdiction to be nominated and then pass as part of the congressional budget. We had submitted a request for $10 million for the Fix 5 Cascade Gateway project, and we're awarded $3 million out of that effort.
Saying it's just gonna be gravel.
Huh? How you want, how the terms earmarks are. We're just thankful that we did get some federal funds for the project. It helps offset a little bit more of the costs here in the state. And so we're happy about that. In terms of the Fix 5 Cascade Gateway project and other grants, we had submitted back at the end of last year funding for the Port and Freight Infrastructure Program and the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program. We're hoping to hear by the end of this month about the Port and Freight funding. We've not heard yet. We thought we were going to hear early in the month. Not happening. We hope by the end of this month. The Trade Corridor Enhancement Program, we'll hope to hear by the June board meeting, whether or not we've gotten those funds. If we don't get both of those, we'll be looking to work with Caltrans on, either going for federal raise grants or other funds or trying for a second round Trade Corridor Enhancement Program.
This is with regards to the Cascade widening project.
Yeah, with the widening project, with all those. So if we can get both of those grant funds, we'll be, I think, just about ready to go to fund that project and get moving.
Is your thinking still just, that's a 1.5 mile, 2 mile stretch? What is it?
Yeah, you're looking roughly from the roadside from about State Route 44, I-5 interchange, all the way then up, actually with some of the work all the way to State Route 151 where you get off at City of Shasta Lake. So it's actually a few miles each direction.
And we're still looking at the far left lane as the dedicated truck lane. And are you considering going further back or just keep it to that area?
Right now, the applications are with what we've submitted so far. Anything else would depend on what fund is available, the costs, and if Caltrans identifies anything else in terms of the project effort. So but it's what was presented at last board meeting. In terms of the RTP, or the Regional Transportation Plan, just an update. We hope to have it now. We're not quite there. We are about 5 weeks out from receiving the environmental documents from our consultants for the 2022 Regional Transportation Plan. Once that is reviewed and finalized by staff, we will then send out the draft plan for public review by our state and federal agencies, as well as community members. You will receive a copy as well. We will then schedule a workshop and then present and discuss the draft plan pending at the June board meeting. At that time as well, We will provide an updated project schedule with a possible request for a special meeting this summer to finalize and adopt that plan. But we'll know a little bit more by the June board meeting. So just to give you kind of an update of why that's not here currently like we had hoped we would. In terms of events, there are a couple of things that we had. One was March 5th and 7th. We had the CalCog Regional Leadership Forum where both board members Mazzano and Audette participated and attended along with myself and Jessica Carlson. It was roughly a 2-day set of sessions about regional planning on a variety of topics: transportation, infrastructure, housing, affordable housing. How do we information about internet broadband as well. Different efforts affecting different regional agencies across the state and kind of what's going on across California. We were talking about existing and upcoming funding efforts, how even some of California's policies have made it a bigger challenge for us to do regional planning, including areas where it's been talked about in the news several times last few years with more people leaving. How do we plan for that if that continues as a trend versus what we've looked at in the past? We also talked about how in breakout sessions, we were able to provide input on state efforts related to resiliency, affordable housing and infrastructure, and how to maintain our transportation system. On stage, one of the biggest things we had with a number of partners that they did reiterate that we need the need by state and federal programs to provide flexibility in those funding programs, allowing differences in regions that were context sensitive. And as also, especially in rural areas or areas where we're trying to complete certain plans that have been in place for a decade or 2 decades, to continue to allow for capacity increasing projects in a variety of different. You had very strong input from a lot of regional agencies across the board about that need and how things are interpreted. I say state agencies overall were mostly silent. They were just receiving it, but they acknowledge the fact that they need to be context sensitive, that they need to be able to recognize existing plans and efforts that have been in place and may need to reevaluate some of their programs, but it will take a little bit of time. So we will see how well they receive the input that's been provided in future efforts over the next couple of years. Of course, some of that with state agencies, they may desire, but if something's built into state legislation, well, they have to do whatever the legislation is written into it. So it was also a chance for a variety of members to let some state elected officials know also the need for context sensitivity and to not impact our regions, allow us to do some of the work that we've been doing. One of the other things that we did have is we did have a session to hear from and provide feedback to Assemblymember Laura Friedman.
So sorry about that.
On a couple of her proposed bills that she has. During that session, regional agencies across the board, from large to small, responded to several of her questions and said, we cannot accomplish anything without a significant amount of state investment and support. And so that, again, context sensitivity needs to be looked at. And that there were concerns about some of the vague wording in some of her proposed bills that may hamper and impact regional planning. We're still tracking those. We're working with CalCog on looking at where that is. CalCog is looking to determine whether or not certain items are support if they're amended or opposed positions. There are a number that they have identified as of concern to potentially oppose, but we're waiting to see. Is it still, the language is too vague for us to have anything to have action on, to actually then have an idea of do we comment or do we not? That might change by our June board meeting, but we'll wait to see, because a lot of times, a lot of these bills, they get thousands of them. A lot of them die in a variety of sessions, so they may not even make it to the point where it makes sense for us to comment until it goes further along in the process where it would be the right time. So we continue to work with CalCog to look at that. Upcoming on June 6th and 7th, CalCog is also hosting what they call a legislative day. So that way we have an opportunity for board member Audette and I to be able to go down as our CalCog representative to meet with different agencies, state legislative representatives, state agency leaders on items that would affect regional planning. We'll also be able to get an update on where we're at with the state budget and what is planned to take place, how state budget negotiations are going. As we well know, those usually go until the last moment before those are finalized. And also get an update of any priority legislation that we are tracking as regional agencies to, again, see if there's anything of Either can we meet and provide some input that affects those bills and how they're worded, or whether or not to start going, okay, maybe now the comment letters need to start rolling in and talking about that. At the same time, we'll have a board meeting, and I also want to highlight that the evening, we will be having CalCog's California Academy Regional Leaders graduation ceremony, which Jessica Carlson is participating in that leadership group this year. So she'll be graduating with the cohort number 5 that they have. One last thing on upcoming outreach, Michael, if you want to put that on the screen for everyone, is the Envision 273 effort. Today, actually, Healthy Shasta is holding their Bike Month kickoff celebration at the park, which is downtown by the Lorenz Hotel. They have some activities going there from 5 to 8 p.m. today. SRTA and Caltrans have a booth there at the event just to share information about Envision 273 effort so far and to make people aware of the upcoming workshops.
At the food truck park, is that what you're talking about?
Yes, it's the food truck park. Michael, can you bring that up on screen larger? It's really small.
I'm sorry, I cannot. It should be appearing full screen, so I'm not sure.
No, we're seeing your other window.
Oh. Okay, one sec.
While we're waiting, at that conference, let me tell you a short, this is very complicated stuff, and I've been doing this for 3 years now.
Was there an incident?
There was.
What happened then?
Sean is sitting there with a computer and he's typing while all the presentations are being made. And then he's got his phone over here and I'm sitting next to him. And I finally had to ask him, are you working or are you, the computer was the conference. The phone was the work. And when I didn't understand something, I just leaned over and said, what's he? And he did it. But to be able to manage all of that, I was impressed. We did the right thing when we hired that man. So now we're on the screen.
I'll just say it was all work. It was all combined there. So, but yes, that was a couple of busy days. On the two efforts at Vision 273, this is a copy of what the flyer is that they're handing out with the folks in the region, letting them know that we have 2 workshops coming up. May 3rd, there's be 2 events taking place in downtown Reading, an open air event at the corner of Tehama and Market Street, and then later that evening, an event at the Shasta College downtown campus building. And then May 4th, 2 events are taking place at the community center in the city of Anderson. Anyone interested can go to www.envision273.org, where the website is at, where there's a lot more information, where you can keep track of the effort and what's taking place. So if you have the opportunity to go to those events, I encourage you. It's a great opportunity to start some early work and get some feedback from the community and share with them about the effort. So
How are we promoting this in the community?
Michael, do you want to talk about what you've been doing about promoting it?
Sure, I can do that. So far, we have placed multiple Facebook events on there and boosted those, so they should be getting a wide audience. We've also placed a half-page ad in Enjoy magazine. We had a feature segment on KRCR News, most recent, one of the most recent evenings this week. I think it was night before last. And we've reached out to several other media outlets and have not heard back yet. And there's one other, we have an ad running on YouTube as well.
Right. Steve, is that on our city's website? Can we put that on our city's website?
We can put it on there.
Let's do that. Let's put that on our city's
I
website.
think there's at least been one share with a couple of our posts from City of Reading that I noticed recently.
Yeah.
On social.
There's a lot of people look at our website and I'd like to see it there and Anderson wants to do that.
Could you give me the times again? I'm not as fast a typer.
11:30 to 1:30 and 5:30 to 7:30.
They will send you a copy of the flyer. Michael will send one out to the full board as well as any other information available so you can share.
Yep.
Yep.
Send it to Christy White at the city of Anderson.
Got it.
Thank you, Mr. Kelstrom.
Of course.
You're there for me, right?
There's a reason they keep us this far apart, I guarantee it.
Completion of that project supposed to be done.
We're looking at the next 18, 20 months for the planning effort to be done.
How far down 273 is it going?
The entire corridor. So the plan's supposed to address the entire corridor.
All the way to,
So all the way from Anderson, where it connects I-5, all the way up to North Reading, we're Twin View, and where it connects there. So that's the whole corridor we're looking at.
how many miles is that?
Let's see, 17.6 miles or 18.6 miles total.
Nice.
Yeah, so it'll be a good effort, work with a lot of partners. One other thing I wanted to do, even though it's not on here, but because you won't meet him until the next meeting, was I want to announce that RABA has a new transit manager, John Ando, and he is here today, and I thought I'd let him introduce himself real quickly, if you'd like to. So, John?
Good afternoon. I'm John Ando, just started this week. I'm pleased to be here in Shasta County and excited to make RABA the best transit system that it can be, efficient, cost-effective, and help improve economic development for the communities we serve.
Where'd you come from? There we go.
I was previously the Mass Transit Administrator and General Manager for the County of Hawaii Mass Transit Agency in Lone, Hawaii for the past 2 years. Prior to
We
that,
have a very similar climate here.
yes. One of my stops, I was the Transit Director in Yuma, Arizona. So I'm familiar with this type of weather.
You get rock fever in Hawaii and want to come back to the mainland?
Wanted to be closer to my longtime girlfriend.
All right. Congratulations and welcome to the city. You'll enjoy it. You'll enjoy the 110 that's right around the corner.
It's a dry heat, Mark.
It's a dry heat, yeah. From Chicago, I can appreciate that.
The buses have AC.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, John. I'm looking forward to working with him. And with that, Chair, that concludes my director's report.
Item 6, and now item 7. Do you know anything about the conference? That's number 7.
Oh, I think I was most surprised with how much the sentiment was the same across the board. LA complained that one size does not fit all, because they have a host of cities that have different needs. So I think you'd be pleasantly surprised that there wasn't really anybody happy about the current requirements and how to pay for them, how to execute them. And so I would say sentiment was pretty overwhelming, no matter what part of the state that you were in, that currently with the amount of information and what's being hoped for, that they haven't quite gotten there how it's going to happen. So I think for all of us up here who drive quite frequently, where transportation is important and we have a way of life, even in cities, they're not liking what's happening. So it was a lot of questions, and I don't think that we're alone in our frustration. So that's good to know. You're not alone. You're not alone.
That was really evident in the breakout sessions.
Yeah.
When you put all these different planners together, they all have different ideas how to solve a problem. And it was interesting. I found it fascinating. So anything else?
Nope.
Let's move on to 8. I think Michael.
All right, let me get the screen sharing. Is that showing up all right?
Yep.
Great. Good afternoon, Chair Mazzano and members of the board. I'm here today to discuss the fiscal year 23-24 overall work program, or OWP for short. The OWP serves 3 primary functions. It is a requirement for an MPO to develop and adopt an annual OWP for the receipt of federal and state transportation dollars. It also serves as a reference document for the public, agencies, and elected officials who desire to understand SRTA's objectives and how these are being met through a continuing, cooperative, and comprehensive planning process. That's known as the 3 Cs. And it serves as a management tool to ensure that all transportation planning activities are being accomplished on schedule and within budget. The OWP is comprised of 4 primary sections. Section 1 describes regional transportation planning responsibilities, priorities, and methods. Section 2 describes how regional transportation planning processes align with federal and state funding priorities. Section 3 outlines current year challenges and opportunities that the work program aims to address. Section 4 describes the agency's revenues, expenditures, and work program divided into work elements. The annual OWP process takes place over several months, with several opportunities for the board of directors to guide the process. In December, the board adopts a regional planning priorities for the upcoming fiscal year. Staff then begins development of the OWP informed by these priorities. In February, staff presented a draft OWP for board review and guidance. The draft OWP incorporating board comments is then submitted to Caltrans, the Federal Transit Administration, and the Federal Highway Administration for review. By the end of March, SRTA receives comments from those federal and state agencies and revises the OWP as needed. In April, the final draft of the OWP is adopted by the SRTA Board of Directors, and the OWP package is then submitted to Caltrans, the FTA, and the FHWA. This year, I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself there. Following the narrative portion of the OWP are the work elements. These describe the work to be done, provide a schedule, and break out the fund sources. And the majority of the work listed in the upcoming fiscal year's OWP is not new. Some of it is carryover or continuing work from the previous fiscal year. Some of it is ongoing tasks, and some is routine administrative tasks. There are, however, 4 new work elements. 70717 will be funded by the upcoming fiscal year's formula planning funds and proposes to evaluate opportunities to create more efficient and cost-effective public transit services. The next 2 are related to competitive planning grant applications that are being submitted, or have been submitted, I should say. One will help local agencies prepare the next round of capital grant-ready active transportation projects, and the other will help update and modernize SRTA's data management system and tools. And the final one is a new information-only work element requested by the FHWA to help track non-consolidated planning grant funds in the region, and it has no fiscal impact to SRTA. So the proposed budget is a little over $5.5 million, which is itself a little more than $800,000 than the original budget for the fiscal year we're currently in. And this increase represents increased federal revenues, anticipation of receiving state competitive planning grant funds, and prior board approved cost of living adjustments. It is therefore staff recommendation that the board of directors do the following, which is up on your screen and in the staff report. Primarily approve the OWP program pursuant to resolution 2304, but also the other clauses listed there. Are there any questions or comments?
Questions from the board?
I've got one or two. On the planning tools, page 18, vehicle emissions modeling and air quality monitoring. Are we actually monitoring? Or are we using models? I don't trust models anymore. And with Doug LaMalfa's asking of the Biden administration experts on his budget when he asked if they knew how much carbon was actually, what percentage was actually in the atmosphere, and they were guessing 4 to 8 and it's 0.04. You know, that's a huge difference. Like, you cannot understate the difference between 0.04% and 4%. So are we using just modeling in our calculations, or are we actually getting real data?
It's my understanding that we use a combination of both. And Sean, please correct me if I'm wrong, but there is actual monitoring of air conditions that happens by other agencies, which is rolled into our planning, but we also use modeling as part of our process.
Yeah, I'll elaborate on that briefly. When it comes to air quality monitoring specifically, for us, what we are doing is we're monitoring the reports that come from the California Air Resources Board. Those reports are based upon, I believe, 4 different stations that actually exist in Shasta County that monitor air quality at those locations. They are overseen primarily through the Shasta County Air Quality Management District that takes place. So we keep track of those to say, what do those reports say? Are there any, what's the trend in terms of different particulates, ozone, et cetera, different emissions that they keep track of? And we keep an eye on to say, are they showing any trend where it may impact us on the transportation side? So when we look at monitoring, that's what we're doing. We look at the official reports that come from the Air Resources Board. When it comes to the emissions modeling, we are using whatever the adopted, both California and federal EPA adopted models are. That's all we can use. Those are the standards that we use. So currently, the MFAC emissions model, we're using the one that has been recommended for us to use to compare our regional transportation plan to itself based upon which cycle of the plan we are in after the adoptions of AB 32 and SB 375 and the extra greenhouse emissions analysis that we have to do. So we are using the adopted models that we have to work with. Whether or not we like them, those are the ones we have to use, that we're required to work with.
Yeah. Well, that's frustrating, to be honest with you. Because when we use the word crisis to drive agenda, which, is questionable if there's actually a crisis. I know many believe it, but I'm not convinced. There's a great article, I'm on page 24 now. There's a great Epic Times article by Roman that shows 30 different, in consecutive order, 30 news articles that basically changed narrative within 1 year from 1978 to 1979. We went from we're all going to freeze to death to we're all going to burn up, we're going to lose the polar ice cap within 1 year. So, and of course that was, using experts and, scientists, and I'm just not buying. So I'm going to continue to push back on that. We're going to this electric thing and it's driving me crazy. Because it's just a lie. It's based on a lie. So I get why we do it. It's because the state tells us that's how we have to move forward. But I'm going to continue to push back on, and that'll come up in a later item.
On that, Board Member Gallagher, under the federal planning emphasis areas, those bulleted points there come straight from the Infrastructure and Investment and Jobs Act, so the federal transportation bill. They're the categories that we have to highlight, that we're told by FHWA to highlight. Those are the terms and the titles they use. Those are ones we have to include. If we don't, we won't get this thing funded. So we address that as best we can to be context sensitive to that while acknowledging the terms and titles that they use.
Okay, I get it. I totally understand. Yeah, that's probably enough for today. Thank you.
Well, there's always things that we tend to disagree with and not like, but in the interest of moving this forward, getting the money, I need a motion to approve this resolution.
I'll move to approve this.
Okay, are you back, Amy? Amy back.
Amy, you're muted.
Yes, I'm here. First by Audette.
First by Audette, second.
I'll second.
Mr. Kellstrom seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Number 9.
Thank you, Chair. While they come up, number 9 is to receive an update on development SRTA Zero-Emission Fleet Transition Rollout Plan. Kevin Wood here represents our consultant that is helping us from Energetics. And Mehdi, you want to come up here too? They have worked on our plan. They have first started with kind of an existing conditions analysis. So what is going to be presented to here today is where we're at today and what they've looked at in their site visits. With that, I'll hand it over to Mehdi and Kevin.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. SRTA contracts with DHCL for specialized public transit services under the ShastaConnect. The state required zero-emission bus transition plan must be adopted by June 30, 2023. And FDA also requires a zero-emission fleet transition plan with several elements to be eligible for related federal program funds. So SRTA contracted with Energetics to address both state and federal requirements in one zero-emission fleet transition rollout plan. And it is recommended that the Board of Directors receive a status update on the development of this plan As Sean mentioned, we have Kevin from Energic today to present existing conditions, findings, and next steps for this plan and answer your questions.
Great, thank you. And thank you for the introduction and it's a pleasure to present to you today. Do I control the slides or just say
I
next slide?
think you tell Michael next.
Okay, Michael, next slide. Thank you. So the outline of the presentation, as Benny said, this is an informational item today, and I've got maybe too much information in this presentation, so I'll go through it relatively quickly, but we should have some time for questions and discussion as well. So I'm going to start with an introduction to the Innovative Clean Transit Rule and talk about what is a zero-emission bus, take a look at the ShastaConnect operations and how those might affect the choice of a zero-emission bus, and go over the challenges of electric or hydrogen, adopting electric or hydrogen bus or shuttle bus and van technology for the ShastaConnect service, and then talk about the next steps in developing this plan. Next slide. So the Innovative Clean Transit Rule was passed by the Air Resources Board going on 4 or 5 years ago now, when it was first proposed, and this was an amendment to other fleet rules that date back to the turn of the millennium. This is separate from the Advanced Clean Fleets Rule, which is working on getting more trucks on the road, electric trucks on the road, and is being considered by the Air Resources Board today. But small transit agencies, such as the ShastaConnect service, must purchase at least 25% zero-emission buses starting in 2026, and starting in 2029, all new vehicle purchases will have to be zero-emission vehicles. And SRTA is the responsible agency for the ShastaConnect service that's operated by DHCL. And this plan needs to be to CARB by June 30th, 2023. So I'll be back at the June board meeting to present the plan for adoption. Next slide. So what is a zero emission bus? As I said, there's two primary choices: a battery electric bus or a hydrogen fuel cell bus. The battery electric bus, just like a Tesla, is storing electrical energy in an onboard battery. So you need a reliable infrastructure to charge it. And depending on that infrastructure, it can get between 20 miles of range an hour to 80 miles of range an hour being plugged in for fast charging. So 160 mile bus will take about 8 hours to charge on one of those overnight chargers. Battery electric buses are more energy efficient in terms of actually converting energy into movement of the bus, but they're potentially slow fueling there. So hydrogen fuel cell buses are your other choice, and that creates electricity in a fuel cell which combines hydrogen and oxygen, and the only emissions are water vapor from that. The vehicles are more expensive than a battery electric bus. They fuel quickly like a traditional gasoline or diesel vehicle. That fuel is often trucked in and stored in pressurized tanks, and they have a longer full tank range than a battery electric bus. For either of these options, they offer cleaner air. There's no tailpipe emissions from either. The vehicles offer a quiet, smooth ride and offer the ability to use locally produced fuel, whether we're talking about energy that's coming from Shasta Dam or other local hydropower, or potentially the Riding Rancheria is looking at producing hydrogen using forest residual wood waste to produce hydrogen. So that's another potential kind of local fuel option for hydrogen. But with either of these options, the vehicles are going to be more expensive. Potentially the fuel could end up being cheaper than gasoline or diesel, but there needs to be infrastructure to support them, training for drivers and technicians. And there's also some resiliency concerns if the grid goes down or the hydrogen supply is not available, how you'll fuel these vehicles. Next slide. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the ShastaConnect operations. So ShastaConnect is a on-demand service that serves areas that RABA doesn't, and primarily providing transit to senior and disabled. So the kind of brighter the color shows where more trips are starting. And right in the center-ish, the brightest spot that's outside of downtown Reading, that's actually the Veterans Home and VA Clinic on Knighton Road. And I know that's going to come up in an item after us, but that appears to be one of the largest sources of trips for this service. But you can see a variety of trips kind of all over the region that are being served from Cottonwood into downtown Reading. It also provides service in Burney and Fall River Mills, which is kind of the inset in the middle. And then on Sunday, when RABA doesn't run, the ShastaConnect is running services throughout Reading with more of it being centered kind of in central Reading on Sundays. Next slide, please. So on average, there's 5 to 6 vehicles running at any given time. That's what's shown in the upper left-hand corner. With some days have 8 vehicles running at the same time. There was one Wednesday sometime in the year that had 10 vehicles running, and 10 vehicles is kind of the maximum fleet size that DHCL currently operates. And what we see below in those graphs are shift distances. And the shift is the total distance covered by a driver in a vehicle in a day. And everything in green, which shows up to about 130 miles, those are shifts that could be covered by a battery electric bus. And then when you get above 130 miles, you potentially need a hydrogen vehicle or a battery electric vehicle that can be charged during the middle of the day, or potentially swapping out, having a driver swap out for another vehicle, or it could potentially be more drivers and more vehicles needed to be able to serve the same number of trips, because today's battery electric buses in a van or kind of shuttle bus size can't do much more than 150 miles. So next, and I'll explore that more on the next slide. So one of the challenges with electric in that range is really looking at terrain and weather. That range can become very variable. So we look at the vehicle that's realistically 140 miles, and DHL has done some test drives of these vehicles, and 140 miles on a nice day they could do. But if you need a buffer for when it's very cold or very hot and you're running your AC, and you don't want to get back to the yard with a 0% battery, that makes the realistic range is routes that are over 120 miles start to become kind of questionable in all seasons. And so that's what we show in the upper left graph, is about 30% of trips should have no problem with a battery electric bus. An additional 10%, you start to kind of eat into that buffer zone. An additional 12%, you should be able to do if the weather's nice, but if the weather's not nice, you could have some problem. And nearly half the trips or the daily shifts just aren't doable with today's technology, battery electric bus. And although it gets very hot here in the summer, the cold is actually the worst thing for the range in the winter. The lower graph there shows that if you could get a 200 mile, a vehicle with 200 real miles of range, you could do over 60% of the trips would be no problem. And 220 or 240, you would be able to kind of get range assurance with a battery electric bus. Moving on to the next slide.
Can I ask a clarifying question? When you say battery, you're talking about a full-size bus. We're not talking about we're talking about the vans. Okay.
For ShastaConnect.
Glad I asked.
Yeah. So ShastaConnect runs the cutaway buses.
This is just ShastaConnect is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
There are, this is an important point as we move to hydrogen. So there are not currently any hydrogen of the cutaway buses or vans operating in California. All the hydrogen buses we have are full-size transit buses. So there are a number of agencies that are, looking at hydrogen vans, but they're not currently available. There's a few manufacturers who are doing pilots of hydrogen vans, but they're not commercially available today in the way that the full-size buses are. The source of hydrogen is important. You can produce it from electricity, you can produce it from natural gas, you can produce it from biomass. Right now, it's being produced in the Bay Area and in Sacramento, but there's potential projects in Shasta and Tacoma County, the Ready Rancheria project I mentioned, also one in Butte County that's looking at producing hydrogen from forest residuals. The one challenge on hydrogen is it's potentially as expensive as gasoline. There's not a fuel cost savings. We're looking at about 67 cents per mile with kind of what we think the price of hydrogen would be. Electricity, if you can get the lowest electricity rates, could be as low as 10 cents per mile. And the current, what DHCL is currently paying for gasoline works out to 50 to 69 cents a mile for $4 to $5 a gallon gasoline. So hydrogen could be a little cheaper than $5 a gallon gasoline, but definitely more expensive than electricity.
Now we know why they bumped the price of gasoline to $7 in California. That would be an effective strategy to get us to hydrogen.
Absolutely.
And hydrogen stations are also kind of expensive. There's significant upfront investment in the hydrogen station. There is already a local station being planned adjacent to the RABA yard that could serve the North State Intercity bus and RABA in the future, and potentially these ShastaConnect vehicles. So that is in the planning, and when that is built, that's a great option for fueling these vehicles. But there's currently not any other stations in the area for resiliency. With that, if that station goes down, there's nowhere else to fuel hydrogen vehicles. I actually saw a hydrogen truck being towed down I-5 today. There's a big show in Los Angeles next week, and I presume it was going to be displayed at the show, but
They weren't willing to drive it though.
Yeah.
there's no.
In the back, but you couldn't run her down the freeway?
Yeah, there's no
Sorry.
No fuel.
fuel to get them there.
There's no public. It was the company is based in Vancouver, Canada, and there's stations up there, and there's the closest station right now is in Sacramento, so it couldn't make it all the way from Vancouver to Sacramento. Next slide. So we did a couple months ago was up here and kind of took a look around the region to see what were some of our infrastructure options. So the current DHCL site that's out by Shasta College does, in their existing electrical service, have capacity to charge a few vehicles, and they have physical space. If we brought in a new transformer, there's physical space for the vehicles and to put charging infrastructure at the DHCL lot. With those other fleet rules I mentioned, they might need to be looking at electric vehicles for some of their Meals on Wheels and food bank services as well. So investing, they might want to make that investment on their own in charging infrastructure. We also looked at some public sites in Anderson, Turtle Bay Park, by the Target, by Mount Shasta Mall that currently have public charging. And it looked like there was space potentially if you needed a midday charge on a battery electric bus, that you could either use those existing public stations or add another station there specifically for these shuttle buses. Next slide, please. So the kind of next step in this project is to kind of finalize our transition plan. And we're looking at using Federal Transit Administration standards as well as practices that RABA and DHCL are currently using, and how often do they have to turn over their vehicles and buy new ones, which is about 11 years for a cutaway shuttle and 8 years for a van. As I mentioned, there's currently 6 cutaways and 4 vans in the fleet used for ShastaConnect service. We're also looking at fleet expansion over time. If the services are expanded and we need more vehicles, those will have to be ZEBs if it's after 2029. And based on our preliminary looking, 2027, so there still is the first year that you might have to buy a zero emission vehicle. But of course, after 2029, anything is gonna have to be zero emission. And we're, talking to other partners in the region, both within Shasta County, but also Butte, Tehama County as well, to understand what they're doing to try to stay consistent on procurement. Next slide, please. So a few of the things we're considering in this plan, for that potential purchase before 2029, there are a lot of grant funds available. If we were to purchase a battery electric vehicle, definitely putting one station at DHCL makes sense. And actually the vehicle that's operated up in Burney, although, potentially colder and more inclement weather up there, there's one vehicle that primarily stays in the Burney Fall River area, and that runs less miles. So that might be a good one to test out.
Doesn't the cold affect that if it's battery?
More so.
It does.
Okay.
But that vehicle rarely runs over 100 miles a day because it doesn't come into town. The Burney Express service is separate.
Is there a minimum temp to charge them? They get under 30 on a regular basis in Burney, so can you actually get it charged if you need it?
Yeah, so when you first plug in the charger, it warms up the battery. It has to warm up a battery a little bit before it starts charging. But if you have a dedicated station and you plug it in, as soon as you're done driving it, it keeps the battery warm to charge it. When the hydrogen station gets built, if it's, ready and operational and there's a fuel cell bus vehicle, van or shuttle available, you could use that station as a pilot. We recommend continuing to watch the advances in battery electric bus range and battery size, and see if longer range vehicles become available. Those can be good options, but if they're not available and there are fuel cell buses available, fuel cell might be the way to go to be able to meet kind of all service. And then they should consider looking at kind of what the charging infrastructure full build out would be if purchasing more battery electric vehicles. Next slide. So one of the things we're doing right now is really refining what the cost estimates are for this transition, but this is just kind of a high level sample. The hydrogen vehicles are about $100,000 to $150,000 more than what the conventional van or cutaway that you're currently procuring, and the battery electric vehicles are between $45,000 and $75,000 more per vehicle. So there's currently grants that offset some of that incremental cost. The yearly fuel cost, as I mentioned, for hydrogen is about $10,000 to $15,000 per vehicle, which is roughly equivalent to gasoline. But the electric cost using running electric rates is only $3,000 to $5,000 a year for electricity. So there is some cost savings there for electric vehicles.
Let me clarify now, those are increases to the cost to run them.
Well, so for the yearly fuel cost, that's the total fuel cost. The first line, the incremental cost, those are increases, but the current gasoline price is about $10,000 of fuel a year.
Okay.
So it would be a savings of $5,000 to $7,000 for electric vehicles.
I would point something out on the cost of electricity. I'm City of Shasta Lake. We buy our own electricity. We have our own system. And currently half of our base load we buy at $50 per megawatt hour, per megawatt. We are looking at buying power 2 years out. We try to buy 2 years out so that we're ahead of the curve. 2 years out, right now, our power costs have doubled. So we're looking like this week buying power 2 years out at double the rate that we're buying at today. And 4 years from now, will probably be double again, but that's pure speculation. But to think that electricity is going to come down is naive in thinking. And we also, PG&E Grid gets 13% of their power from Diablo Canyon. They were going to decommission it in 2025. They postponed that till 2030.
A year after they're gonna.
5 years. And in 2029, you're going to mandate all these electric vehicles. I don't know if anybody wants to tell the emperor he has no clothes on, but that's about where we are with this whole idea. But anyway, thank you.
That's good feedback. So on our cost analysis, we should do some sensitivity testing on future fuel costs. The 3,000 to 5,000 is at current running electric rates, which are about 30% cheaper than PG&E. But we can do some sensitivity testing on if those rates are double in the future.
You won't get REU rates in Burney.
You
won't get them in Anderson.
Yeah.
Correct.
You won't get them, you'll get them within the boundary, but outside of that. So listen, and I may or may not be speaking for Greg Watson or the rest of the board here. We're not mad at you guys. We love what you do. We're thankful for the hard work you put in. Please don't be offended by our comments. It's not personal. We're just really, some of us, I'm not gonna speak, I'll speak for myself. When I hear facts like that, that's facts. They've already purchased that power 2 years out. This is not a speculation. This is what makes us go sideways. And I appreciate all you do, but this is what makes us go sideways because all those monies are gonna come out of the taxpayer's pocket. And those are increases. You're talking about $100,000 more for a vehicle. You can buy a lot of fuel for $100,000.
And the recharge time on a diesel truck is about 5 minutes.
I love my recharge time on my diesel truck. I'm really.
On that though,
Sorry, we're cutting you off, my friend, and I know you.
I'll just add,
Didn't finish, but
Yeah.
Shasta has a question.
Oh, good.
Go ahead.
I would just say on that, that's one of the things that we're like, so the REU was used because DHCL's facilities within the REU service area. Anything we probably do initially would be within that service area, but you're correct. As we look at whether or not you're out in Burney, other locations, or if there's other stations. So if they were to be charging, they'd have to factor in, hey, if all of a sudden they're charging in Anderson and in Shasta Lake, as a portfolio from operations plan, the operator's gonna have to look at that and say, okay, what are my total costs now based upon where vehicles getting staged? But that's part of that long-term plan of what we're doing, but it's good feedback for us to know as well. I would acknowledge also that I've been hearing in the last 3 to 4 months, even a lot of the bigger transit agencies have started talking about this issue, that they also are seeing electricity costs go up, which is counter to what past planning studies have been done. And so it is an ongoing thing that we will have to look at as an operations standpoint.
John, not only are the costs going up, but the brownout hours are coming, and our city, we have we're putting in a fast electric charger, but we have put a city ordinance in that says when we have limited supplies, we are cutting the power to the electric charging station before we cut it to the homes that have air conditioning.
Right.
So we're looking ahead. We already have that ordinance in our city that we're not going to charge electric vehicles and turn off people's air conditioning in their houses with rolling blackouts.
Yeah, no, and those are all the things that we've got to factor in as we think ahead. Board Member Audette?
I had a question about, it says no additional cost to existing station. Does that mean that for hydrogen fuel, it can be added to a regular gas station?
That's, no, that's for the station that's being planned next to Raba. If you're just fueling one bus, it wouldn't, no changes. That station would be able to serve 1 or 2 additional buses. So there'd be no additional cost to that station.
Additional dispenser, so that's just.
So the additional dispenser is if you had 12 vehicles fueling there and you needed to add an extra pump.
It's just one extra pump.
One extra pump would.
Can add on to what it looked like, what it is now?
To what it is expected to be in the next few years.
Because I mean, if they're transitioning to electric, we talked about this at the CalCog thing. If they're transitioning to electric and you start to eliminate gas stations, are you saying it's easier to retrofit to a hydrogen at a gas station? Or this is something totally separate?
This is just because there's a current hydrogen station being planned, to add to that station, to a hydrogen station that's being planned. It's not too expensive to add a few more vehicles that can be served by that station. But
I'll jump in on there. So the assumption there is based upon, and it's gonna depend on the type of station that you have for a hydrogen station. If it's a smaller, that's a more portable one, you're talking, maybe you're assuming, fueling 5 to 8 vehicles, hydrogen buses on a given day as a daily average. Because we were starting off very small with a small amount, there's no additional cost initially because we've already planned for a certain capacity to be prepared for. So if we've only got 1 or 2, then the hydrogen is going to last us longer for a longer period with the assumption that we're designing a station to have a certain daily usage and everything. But that will vary based upon increased use and everything. We're still in early efforts on our plan. RABA is still in early efforts on their zero emission plan as well from a staffing standpoint to see what does this look like. So there's a lot more work that's going to go into this to really update this information. So
Just a comment, if I may. There's a lot of questions, but what you need, I think you need to understand is, SRTA is chasing grants. And these are all the conditions of grants. And you'll see, like in the resolution here, where you authorize the director to sign annual certifications and insurances. I don't know that you've ever seen those, but if anybody suggests that this money's free, take a look at your assurances and certifications. So, I don't think it's fair to have these people defend the reality of this. Because, anyway.
So there's just one more slide. That's my final slide. And then if we have time for more.
You almost made it there.
So the next steps are to finalize these transition scenarios, and we are continuing to look at both hydrogen and electric, getting more detail into those infrastructure build outs with kind of talking to REU in terms of what a power extension costs and understanding, at what level we need more hydrogen infrastructure and refining these costs and where the funding will come from. And then completing the plan to meet both CARB and FTA, which the Federal Transit Administration requirements. And the work we're doing specific to the federal side will keep SRTA in compliance to potentially receive more federal funding for vehicles, infrastructure, and operations of these vehicles. And the things you see up there are just some of the requirements that are what needs to be included in the plan. So we are looking at the future purchases, the facility needs, effect on low-income and disadvantaged communities, kind of where the funding is going to come from and what the challenges are for the fleet. I'd also highlight the workforce impacts, how are these going to be maintained? And currently Red Bluff has some electric school buses, and when they break down, they get towed down to Sacramento to get fixed. And as more of these vehicles up here, that's not financially sustainable to pay for towing a bus to Sacramento when it needs to get fixed. So we'll look at what the needs are up here as well. And with that, I'm happy to entertain any more questions.
Great statement right there, my friend. Well done.
I have one question, unless I missed it. What's the average mileage that these cutaway buses or ShastaConnect are putting on a day?
Yeah, so that I don't know if you want to flip back a few slides of those charts, but it's a range. There's one more chart back.
yeah, it's going to vary on, we average somewhere around 149, miles up to, they get up to 180.
Oh, okay.
On depending on the trip, the distances of the request of the vehicle is. So the one thing we're tracking also with all of the information about the frequency and distances that they have is as we get to the higher mileage, that for existing equipment, for battery electric buses, that's starting to push, especially given our terrain, our weather and everything. So these are all things we're trying to factor in. It says, okay, based upon what's available today, if you had a transition now, what does that look like and how do you plan? And then what are they suggesting future efficiencies might be in a few years? I'll just add too, the one thing as we develop this, there are a variety of exceptions that the rule has. One of those being too, that as you look at it, there's a certain requirement that says, hey, when you purchase between now and until 2029, only a certain percentage of your new purchases have to be zero emission. CARB, in their niceness for once, as staff said, look, we recognize the challenges of various equipment not available for smaller agencies. So for instance, if every year we purchase 2 vehicles, we don't meet the threshold, I could purchase 2 additional gas vehicles a year if it made sense and we actually needed to replace the vehicles and not have to buy zero emission vehicles at the time. So there's that. There are also a variety of exceptions that say, hey, look, if I do analysis like what we did initially with Salmon Runners, that battery electric coaches did not meet the range requirements after 2 years and said it was going to huge degradation to service the intent, you can make that argument and submit that to CARB and say, look, the vehicles that are not available are terrain or other issues, and have a consultant do the analysis and say they're not feasible to buy new until these thresholds are met. And until those are there, we could rely on that to have exceptions if we needed to replace a vehicle until those vehicles are available. So there are other service needs that we can look at that we will evaluate as part of this plan. And it's a long-term process for us. So probably, every couple of years, we're going to be reevaluating and looking at this and see how things change and make adjustments.
Okay, thank you.
So sorry, I'm going to say it. There is no such thing as zero emission vehicles. So we ought to all just latch onto that, because I saw a report recently that it takes 1,000 liters of fuel to move enough material to get just one of the elements that is required for these batteries. And I believe that was just for a car. So, all we're doing is, we may be trying to clean up the air in California, but what are we doing to South Africa where, child labor? It's a very inconvenient truth, but that is what's going on. We don't have to like it, but that's what we're talking about. That's a reality. And so we're not actually lowering the emissions. We're just having somebody else deal with it. So that's not okay with me. And I get it where we're going, but I'm going to call that out because that's what's going on. You don't have to like it, but that's the truth. The second thing is, I was watching one of the Senate hearings, and is it Buttigieg that's the federal guy?
Yeah.
He literally admitted that there's no way we can get the infrastructure to handle this charging and I'm not mad. I'm not mad at that. But what they're forcing you to do, they can't support because there's not enough cables and wires and infrastructure across the grid to handle what they're forcing us to do. And he had no intention of trying to even tackle it. Oh, we'll just have to deal with that when it comes. Well, guess what? In 2029, what is going to happen? We have got to wake up because we're doing all this work for something that's not going to work. And I'm not, again, I wish you had others. I know you're brilliant. So I wish your energy and your talents were being used on something that would actually benefit society instead of, the problem is that people don't want to understand is that where we're going, we're barreling down the road of them controlling us. When the state takes over PG&E, and I said that right, you heard me correct. When they do that, you think we got problems with power now? Wait till the state of California is running it. We will not charge any of your electric vehicles or your bicycles or anything else. That won't be happening. So maybe I'll be, made a fool, but I believe time will.
I think that
actually
you have to rely on
truth.
The advancement in technology. And you got to hope that by 29,
There's not enough power being produced. They want to shut down the most efficient power plant we have in California. My buddy built the thing with PG&E. They want to shut that down. What happens when they get that? Because CARB and all these other 4-letter institutions decide we just don't want to take the risk on that energy source. What is going to happen? They're only letting people build 3 megawatt generation plants when it comes to biomass. Sorry, I'm not being as articulate as I would like to be, but they do that for a reason. And the reason they're only letting them generate 3 megawatts is because it barely pencils. There's no profit in it. If they could build a 6 megawatt plant, then it would pencil in that, and that for-profit company would invest in producing biomass power generation plants and we wouldn't have an energy problem, except that we don't have enough wires to handle all the energy that we need. So figure out how are we gonna lay underground wires? This is the realities of where we're at, yet we're barreling down the road. And how are we gonna power the train, by the way? Because how much energy is that gonna take? So there's that. So this is the truth. This is the truth that we'd better start grabbing a hold of. So, sorry, I almost started.
I don't want to get off track. All right?
No pun intended.
Right. And thank you for your presentation. We will continue to advance. And, you know, Mike, your whole theory will fall apart if we get a new governor. And
They tried to recall him once.
all right, but he's not going to be around forever, so let's hope for that. But let's move forward.
I apologize, but
No.
It's the reality of it.
Needed. There's definitely, one of the other things we're doing is we're working with Pacific Gas and Electric and the other utilities to kind of look at what it's going to take to transition the fleet. And there are folks at the utilities, you know, trying to figure out how we're going to do it. And you know, I've been out to about 50 different fleets that are a lot of electric school buses, electric trucks that are trying it out, seeing the challenges and trying to figure it out. So we're learning a lot, but there's definitely challenges.
all three power companies in California have now submitted a permit request to charge based on our incomes now. So there's a reality to that. So what happens when that gets passed? Like, you're gonna pay to charge your car based on your income? That you can afford the $80,000 Tesla? So now they're gonna charge you more than the person who can only afford the $35,000 Tesla? I mean, this is the reality, people.
I want to move on. He's got
I
something
understand.
else to say. We're going to move on.
Kevin, I had a question there. You were talking about the different hydrogen, and all of the hydrogen being produced in Sacramento is brown hydrogen. Isn't only green hydrogen really coming out of Canada where they have a lot of hydroelectric?
So the brown hydrogen is being produced from natural gas. The green hydrogen can be produced from excess solar or hydropower. And there is actually seasonally right now, there's actually negative power prices right now. We are paying Arizona to take excess power from California in the spring when all our hydro plants are producing and all our solar. So in the future, when there's excess solar or other renewables, they want to produce hydrogen.
The problem with producing hydrogen, you weren't here when we had a previous meeting on this. Hydrogen has to be produced 24 hours a day. And while there's plenty of power from 10 to 4, and it's cheap there, you can run up 100%. You still have to keep producing hydrogen all night from 5 to 9, even though you have to produce at least at 20% capacity to keep the system running. So there isn't enough electricity to produce in California to produce hydrogen anywhere. You might be able to do a little bit of biomass, but I think that without a subsidy, they can't truck the biomass to the plant economically to produce electricity.
Actually, there's a huge project going on right now with extracting hydrogen from biomass and going to be in Red Bluff. So it's wave of the future for sure.
Thank you for the information. Let's move on to item 10.
Wish Mike would tell us what he really thinks.
Really good presentation. Thank you so much. That was good information. Appreciate it.
Jennifer.
Michael, can you get the PowerPoint going, please? Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Mazzano and board members, partners, and public. Our member of the public is here. I am here today to present on the Transit Needs Assessment and the Transportation Development Act. My colleague Jessica Carlson will be presenting on the Transportation Development Act budget, but they do go hand in hand, so we're tag teaming on this. The agenda item is going to go over what we do in an annual process. We assess transit in the area. We consider any potential changes to the transit service. And then we develop our Transportation Development Act based on those transit needs that are talking about today. Let's see. So the transit needs us, can you go to the next slide, please? I know this is a lot of words, but we do have 6 recommendations as part of this. So I will be addressing the first 3 and Jessica will be addressing the second set of them, 4, 5, and 6. What we have gone over at the February board meeting, we had the unmet transit needs and a draft transit needs assessment, and it was out for public review. That has been finalized and is on our website. We've presented it at actually 2 different meetings. Presented it first on March 15th to our Social Services Transportation Advisory Council. That is an advisory council to this board. And then because of the continuation of discussion about requests for service to the VA clinic, Veteran Administration's clinic, and across the street, Veterans Home, and down the road, Knighton Road, to the regional Reading Regional Airport, we came back later in the month of March with the SSTAC and finalized their recommendation. And we have the chair, Patrick Egan, here today from our Social Services Technical Advisory Council, SSTAC, to speak with you and present their recommendation. So ultimately, what on the staff side of things, what we are recommending is that we want to maintain all current services that are funded with the Transportation Development Act, and we want to continue all services that are grant funded. The grant funded services include the Sunday service that we've been running for several years now, about 3. Expanded CTSA service is also grant funded, in addition to the 5% set aside that they get from the Transportation Development Act. And then the Whiskeytown Beach Bus, which is a seasonal service that we run from Memorial Day weekend to Labor Day weekend. We're recommending that we continue all those. The existing other service, of course, is the Reading Area Bus Authority service. The one kind of change that we're recommending, and it will be we're suggesting it be grant funded, is that the Monday through Friday service that is provided by DHCL, Dignity Health Connected Living through the ShastaConnect brand, extend their hours. Right now they're going till about, I think, 3 or 3:30. We want to extend those hours to 5 or 5:30 so that we meet all of the appointment times at the VA clinic. So that's the only change in service that we're recommending, and that would be grant funded, not TDA funded. With the reason that we're not recommending any new services is that the ridership right now has not returned on RAVA services to pre-pandemic levels. Operating costs are increasing, and because of those things, we're struggling to meet our fare box, which is a requirement. And the beach bus service has had a great increased ridership. This stuff was all presented at the February meeting, but the beach bus had increased ridership last year, and we're looking to do that again this year with some good marketing. And then the Sunday service has been doing well, and the expanded CTSA service. So we want to continue those services. The ShastaConnect branded services are an alternative delivery method than fixed route. So we're in a time period right now where we're seeing if this is another way that potentially we could deliver services that the Reading Area Bus Authority fixed route services are not delivering right now. They're delivering, but they're not delivering well. So those 2 options are an alternative delivery method that we're testing right now. And with that, I would like to invite Chair Deegan of the Social Services Social Services Transportation Advisory Council to present on their recommendation. Can you go to that next slide, please?
Good afternoon, members of the Board of Directors. First off, my name is Patrick Gagan.
Oh, thank you, Gabe.
It's an Irish name. And I'm here to present the unmet transit needs from the Social Services Technical Advisory Committee. With that, we did recommend that the continuation of the Sunday service through DHCL should be continued. We also recommended that it be continued to expand the CTSA, which is the Consolidated Transportation Services Agency, to include on-demand services for Saturday. We also recommended that the board explore on-demand services for Saturday services as a alternative to the low performance of the fixed route services provided by Rollout. We are also recommending that the consideration to incorporate the summer beach bus as a permanent route, whether it be a special or seasonal route within RAVA. We recommend that efficiencies and actions to reduce overlap between RAVA and DHCL's services be considered for expanding the service by ShastaConnect. Let's see, explore options to improve the long-range transit plan, low-income strategy, which is either reduced or free rate capabilities. Next recommendation I had was to consider a city commuter route to Shasta Lake that would also serve Buckeye residents, and it would be like a direct commuter service like the Anderson commuter. And finally, we had the very long discussion and recommend that a new route or service be established for the Knighton Road and Reading Regional Airport areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And with that, I wanted to wrap up the transit assessment portion of the staff report. The fiscal year 2023-2024 transit needs assessment is complete. The Social Services Transportation Advisory Council has presented their recommendations. And again, we recommend, can you go to the next slide, please, Michael? We recommend that all current services be maintained and as well as all grant funded, TDA and grant funded services be maintained. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Jessica for the Transportation Development Act budget.
Great. Hello, everyone. I will be brief because that's the type of person I am. I'd like to just remind you that what I'm asking for as far as recommendation and action items is to both approve the budget and approve me submitting the payment instructions to the county controller, who is the one who distributes the allocations to each of the jurisdictions in accordance to attachment attachment E. So just a few key points I want to go over that are all convenient for you in table and chart form. We have chart number 1 is basically just to remind the board that DHCL and the CTSA are not eligible to receive the FTA funding that the fixed route and complementary paired transit services support. So I just wanted to highlight that with the CTSA 5% off the top and the LC top portions and projects that are approved by the board for the CTSA service are minute in comparison to what the fixed route is capable of getting for their operating costs. So this is just to support our recommendations for this budget to continue to set aside the 5% for the CTSA and that considerations for future transit-related projects funded by the STA reserve might also consider the needs of DHCL and the CTSA service. So that's chart 1. Table 1 is a really convenient table that splits the jurisdiction payments that we will be receiving out of the TDA funding that includes both the Local Transportation Fund, or LTF, and the State Transit Assistance, or STA. So if you find your jurisdiction on the top bar, you will be able to see your payments in that column, and the left bar shows you what part of the TDA budget that is coming from. So hopefully that's pretty clear.
Can you bump up that 431 a little bit, Brandon?
Who wants to participate in reducing their payments so that Anderson can have more? Hands, no.
No.
We'll talk about that future meeting.
Come on, where's the love, people?
So, thank you, Michael, for following along. Page 6, we are going to chart 2. I am just going to highlight that the peak from last year, which is that red line at the top. Ooh, can you point to it for me, please, Jen? I forgot to grab that pointer for you. There's a $12 million peak in LTF. Oh, it doesn't show on the screen. Okay. I will be Vanna White for you. In case. So I just want to point out your $12 million peak right here in LTF. The TDA budget considers a true up from the last audited fiscal year. So in this year, fiscal year 22-23, we were auditing 2021. When we created the budget for 2021, the preceding year, we were heavily anticipating a huge hit on the economy in Shasta County due to the COVID pandemic. And so we greatly reduced our expectations for revenue in that year. And we distributed the TDA budget based on those assumptions that we were going to receive less sales tax. So when we audited that year in a true up for the 22-23 budget, we ended up not having the impact, COVID ended up not having the impact on our economy that we thought we were going to have, which is great for us. And so we trued up those amounts, gave you the LTF back that we had anticipated you wouldn't be getting, and put it into this pot. So it created this peak in a compensating way for the true up that we were doing for this year where we under budgeted. So what I want to point out to you is although this 9 million seems a little alarming considering that you got 12 million last year, it is still on an upward trend over a 10-year period. Okay. Moving on to page 7. I just wanted to show, because we did bring this to the Fiscal and Policy Committee, we had lots of content in the report about our STA reserve allocations and other projects that we need to identify that are transit specific in rural areas for a few reasons. One, our STA reserve allocations continue to be in the hundreds of thousands each year. What that means is that the STA allocation, after we give the distributions their portions based on our 80-20 policy, we still have STA left over that comes from the state. We have to put it somewhere. So by policy, we put it into the STA reserve. We need to identify projects not only to use the STA reserve we have, but now Shasta County has received 3 one-time COVID-related grants, both what we call CRRSA, C-R-R-S-S-A, I think, and then the ARPA funds. So American Rescue Plan Act, and it's here somewhere, the COVID-related Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act. And those funds together are close to 1.7 million in those one-time funds. So here's the thing that we talked about in Fiscal and Policy Committee, and anybody want to chime in, you're welcome to do that. These funds need to be used for transit-related projects in rural areas. And so at roughly an average over 5 years of $311,000 dollars to run the Burney Express. There's just not quite enough transit services being provided in rural areas to help spend down these funds. If you do not spend down these funds, you risk being de-obligated, and the state will take them back and give them to someone else. So it's important for us to identify transit-related rural projects as a community and a region so that we can spend down the $1.7 million and the continually increasing reserve in STA. So we will be brainstorming. We are always looking for ideas, but we will continue to receive project ideas in order to increase that those budget line items. What I did want to address is that there is some concerns about starting maybe a new pilot project in a rural area. Perhaps the VA Knighton Road type services, expanding hours with the CTSA, these type of projects, and there might be concern about permanence. If these are one-time grants and we start this new service, it's great. Who's going to pay for it later? I just want to encourage you that at the tune of $1.7 million, when Burney Express service is $300,000 a year, I think we have some time to figure out where new funding on a more permanent basis could come from. So not dismissing concerns, addressing concerns, and encouraging you that we can figure that out. So do not hesitate to give your ideas of new and expanding services in rural areas.
Can I ask a qualifying question on when transit, not transportation? So transit means taking people from point A to point, moving people. Does improving our bus stops, would something like that qualify? Because I'm always sad when I go by a couple of our stops in Anderson and they're out in the weather and there's a few people that ride in Anderson.
Yeah, so.
Not to pass the buck, but
I'm not-
Jen is a great resource on developing transit related.
But we would juggle our funds, those funds that are under ARPA and CRISA, they are under contract with Shasta County Public Works and they are for operations. But that doesn't mean that our annual allocation of 5311 could not be used for bus stop.
But I'm thinking one-time funds do things like that where there's not this incurred, because I'm not too hip on having to go find a funding source to continue the process. It's just me personally, but.
No, and one way to increase ridership is improving bus stops so that they're nice and
I mean, we have one, I think, that's under on the Safeway side. That one's got a roof over it, but the one on the opposite side of the Balls Ferry there, it's out in the open. So just food for thought.
Great ideas. SS TAC helps us too. The TNA always gives us ideas from public, thank you, from public outreach efforts as well. So we should continue to develop those ideas. Page 8, Michael, if you don't mind, streets and roads allocations. Again, I don't want to scare you. This is from the true up, I promise you. Because RABA is not receiving the COVID-related funds that have not budgeted for revenues that include the COVID-related funds like CARES Act, ARPA, et cetera, that were in previous budget years. You're going to see a drop in your bottom line, is what I like to call it, which is your other eligible uses. Most of the jurisdictions like to use these other uses as for streets and roads projects, including maintenance. And so your budget is going down from $9.5 million last year to $5.8 million this year, spread across the jurisdictions. However, again, the trend line is still increasing. So do not panic. It goes back and forth. The true ups help resolve this. Again, it has to do with the federal grants that come into the region that RABA can use towards their operating budget. And if those aren't there, they have no other revenue source besides the TDA. So we are going to support RABA first as our public transit system in accordance with the TDA legislation. So they're first. And our streets and roads are the other uses, so they are the bottom line essentially. So with your action, I would appreciate you approving the TDA budget as included in this staff report and attachments D and E. Your second action for me, number 5, is going to be the payment instructions, which are your back page. And then number 6 is any administrative changes that we have to make throughout the year that are non-substantive can be done by Sean. Oh, and any questions, of course.
Yeah, any
Please.
questions, and then we do have a member from the public.
You're up. I'm good. Yes, sir.
Could I address the board on that, sir? Thank you, Chairman Lozano on board. I'm Don Black. I'm the director of the Knighton Road Clinic. We moved there from Hartnell. We've been in town for over 30 years. I can assure you, we're not moving. We signed a 20-year lease, so we'll be on Knighton Road for 20 more years. Part of our responsibility for building the clinic out there, and we're working with the city of Reading and our landlord, was choosing the property. The clinic had to be on a bus line. We built it on a bus line, and we opened on December 10th, 2021, and the bus line was terminated on December 1st. So we've never had an opportunity to see what the bus line was. You saw from the ShastaConnect. We are using the ShastaConnect, and my approach there, board, I got chastised when I got back because I was only selling the need for our homeless population. We have a severely homeless population that utilize that. I've gone back and I've had several veteran committees meeting. We serve over 16,000 veterans at the clinic to the tune of 108,000 visits annually. I can get that. Those are facts. 68% of our population is over the age of 65. Many of those have lost their licenses due to medical conditions, strokes or Alzheimer's. They can't get there. They're mostly daughters can't get them down there. And so they use rapid transit to try to get to the community. A lot of our homeless will ride their bikes out there. There's not a bike lane. There's not a safe way for our population to get out there. So we just asked the board to consider for the future. I know you have some of these funds or whatever that you look at the opportunity, how we can grow. I couldn't bring the director from the state home, but when they did have the bus line out there, there's 150 permanent residents that are at the state home, and not all of them are allowed to drive any longer. They were using that bus line to come down into town to go shopping at the malls. They've lost that opportunity, and they're kind of stuck, as they would tell you, they're imprisoned out there. But so we're just, we know that there was a large interest. Our new veterans do have a large interest to be able to get out to the clinic, and we would just ask that you consider somehow in the next year how we can look at working together, possibly funding a full route, a partial route, start something 2 to 3 days a week, Tuesday through Friday. We do have veterans that come from the clinic or that are discharged from the hospital from Mercy and Shasta and say, my clinic's at Reading and Knighton Road, and they get a ride out there and it's 4:30 and we close, and there's no way to get them back in town. Ubers don't want to come out there and pick up these patients, and we tend to pull money together and pull a cab so we can get these veterans to either the missions or back to their homes, because there's currently no form of transit for any of our veterans. And you can look at old routes. We were on 351 Hartnell for 25 years. Prior to that, we were on Eureka Boulevard. And again, we're part of the community and we're not going anywhere.
I can, during the transit need assessment, we did do a survey, and we had, I think it was around 34 responses that asked for service to the VA clinic, veterans home area, and 4 or so to the Reading Regional Airport. I know those numbers aren't high. They are our highest that we've ever had. So for a specific location, we'd had really good response from the community.
Would that be like 34 a day?
No, sorry, that was the responses to a survey.
Okay.
So that we're requesting service to that area.
What do you feel like the ridership would be daily? And I'm not trying to just throw a number, like.
I didn't know. I've asked that to say how we compare it to, because they have the ridership from 351 Hartnell. I do know that we have 80 chronically homeless, what they consider people that don't have, or veterans that don't have home anywhere for a 12-month period. They're living on the streets. So I know that. I've been asked to provide that, but I couldn't, I come to this group saying I couldn't guarantee that we're gonna have 20 veterans ride a day or 50 ride a day. I can tell you a day after, because we have an urgent care there, right? We're one of the urgent care, one of the only VAs in the North State that has urgent care. So veterans come from Wairika, we have a clinic. Chico, we have a clinic. Eureka, there's a clinic, and they know their urgent care. They don't want to drive to San Francisco. They don't want to drive to Sacramento. They'll come to Reading. So we have an urgent care. And so I know we get that. I don't know what ridership would be. I know the veterans do come in from Burney and from Trinity County, and they get to the bus terminal downtown, and then there's no way to get out from that bus terminal to the clinics. I could not guess. I wouldn't want to put that.
That's fair.
And the prior service that served that area was subsidized with the IASCA pilot program. So IASCA paid for enough monthly passes for the service to be fully subsidized. And once IASCA shut down, the service was cut mid-year, like he said.
Chuck, what's the ability to run a service there? You can see something of a need there. What can be done to?
Yeah, certainly we can run a service. I will say that we used to have the airport route, and like Jen said, that it was mostly paid for by those passes. We, quite frankly, when we were running that service out there to the clinic itself, we're getting, and you get a few people. You get maybe 2 a day or something like that might, or every other day. There were people that need to go, and obviously they need to get there. You can run that service. It was costing us. I think for an 8-hour, 8 routes a day, I think it was costing somewhere in the $350,000 range or something like that at that point. I'd have to run some numbers to see what it is, but it just takes money, and you're likely not going to meet a fare box ratio on that, so it would be a decision of what the board just wanted to provide that service.
Haven't had a fare box ratio in 20 years.
But I think there's a decent solution here, and at least in the interim, in that allowing ShastaConnect to run out there and expand those hours to when the clinics.
A demand on response type work better, or what are you thinking?
Well, if you'd
I think that would be a better service for that, maybe John can weigh in, but I think that would be the right type of service. And at least with what is happening now, you're going to get some ridership numbers and kind of see where you are and what that demand really is.
So I'd like to interject in here because I want to answer Board Member Gallagher's question about ridership. ShastaConnect already goes out to the VA home and can serve the VA clinic. It has been after the RABA had cut the Airport Express route. On a given monthly basis, and this is from I'd say last 4 months I have standing data. ShastaConnect shows that to the VA home itself, a monthly average of 80 to 120 trips per month is what we've averaged out to the VA home itself. With the VA clinic, we've been as high as 40 trips for a given month. That's because of the ShastaConnect service. I know my endpoints. I know the starting point and the end point. So I can say on-demand trips, the greatest thing about that is that one, we can address and actually know how many trips are going to that place. When I asked for some input from RABA, when we were first having some discussions a while ago, I said, hey, how does that compare to the VA clinic and other home services out there? The closest RABA stop that was there had a roughly about 40 trips on average a month to that stop.
You're talking about the one that wasn't.
At the one that is at Hartnell. So now that's just the last couple of years when the route was serving there and when the facilities were there. You'd have to go back and look into it further. We could work with RABA to really look at history. The one challenge you have with the RABA stop is that you cannot guarantee that all those trips to and from that stop are actually going to that facility because there's a variety of other things. There's banks, there's food services and other things nearby. The one benefit with on-demand service is you know exactly where people are coming from and where they're going from that type of a service. It has a convenience factor that plays in. However, we do acknowledge one thing that Don did brought up, especially with the homeless population. An on-demand service requires us to know the types of riders that are coming on, so we send out the right types of vehicles, especially when you're talking to people that have a disability, right? Especially a wheelchair user. And so we have certain capacities of vehicles. With the homeless population, if they're not able to use a phone to tell us that, or not able to email or call, that makes it a challenge on that service, an on-demand service, to know the appropriate vehicle to send out there. You also have a challenge of, do you need multiple vehicles? Let's say you show up and you've got 8 people and you've only got a vehicle to handle 2 wheelchairs and half of them are wheelchair. So there are those challenges with on-demand service where if you have a fixed route bus that might have a 3 or 4 capacity for those with mobility challenge, you're probably not going to worry about that issue and you can send one vehicle. So there's pros and cons to having a express route or something or on-demand service or coming out with a combination. I would say right now, we've got folks that would use the service from an on-demand side. We do have that challenge of the current service is not going late enough, which we've heard back, and we asked each sale to say, hey, can you do that? What would that cost to be? And how could we do it? So in this instance, what we're suggesting is trying to go for low carbon transit operations program funding. So get grant funding to try that to see. That's in the next agenda item there. To initially do that because the costs are greater than what we have available to provide to DHCL based upon the increased cost of service, fuel, and all those other challenges that we have. So trying to look at other grant funds to try that at first. With the recommendation, if RAVA finds something that works out, then we would have to work out how to make sure you back off service so you're not using one service model to impact the other. So there's still some other things that have to be explored and studied in conjunction with partners. And I don't know yet that we've had the opportunity to work with our partners, especially at RAVA, to say, how do we handle the homeless population issue and challenge?
We need to do that.
Amen.
We need to do that, Chuck. We need to figure out how to get those veterans out there. That population is not dwindling, it's growing. And we need to make it a priority for SRTA and RAVA to find a way to get them out there. I see veterans all the time. And I got to tell you, I think most of them have phones. But I understand that challenge and having the right type of vehicle there. But I also think that the facility, I would, if I'm off base here, tell me, but you've got to have some veterans that are coming there on a regular basis for regular treatment. We can identify that and we could factor that into the hours of service. If we could get that information in a collaboration here so that if we know that we've got 5 veterans that have to go there from 3 to 5, we need to find a way to accommodate that.
Can I just throw something out? And I'm not trying to fix, I would love to fix it because I think we have done an incredible disservice to our veterans. That's my personal opinion. And I didn't serve. I'm thankful for those who did. If I heard you correct, sir, that what if we could do a downtown to the clinic bus route and run the big blue bus and I mean, we do all kinds of other pilot programs with our transportation. We get the message out to the camps. I mean, Mark, you do that, there's ways to do it. My wife's involved with a group that goes out to the camps and let those veterans know if you're there and maybe we don't, Chuck, I heard you, maybe it's not 8, but if we started with 4 a day, run the last one late so that we can pick those people up and get them back to the main station downtown. Maybe it's only 400,000, but that's pretty cheap to serve that particular group of people we should be serving. And I would be absolutely ready to spend one-time money to get it started and try it because I'm not okay with them and they don't, whether they have a phone or not, some of them aren't capable, but they know where the bus station is. Right, they might not be able to set up an on-demand call or want to, but if they knew that they could go down to the bus station and get on that bus at some point and get out to the clinic, they might. And if we can get them to you, they're going to get some help.
And that's what we had talked about possibly, like even if it was 3 days a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, you're going to be down there at 9, 11, and 4 or whatever that is.
Yeah, I mean,
and we can post that or we can get that out to the community to say, hey, look, there's 3 or 2 or 4, times a day that you're going to get down here, but we're also going to get you from the clinic back down here.
That's right.
And that's a kind of a centralized area and it's right across from the VFW there.
We got lots of good people going into those camps, working with those folks.
But I think that your facility should have that information because they're all coming to you. So, I mean, we don't have to go to the camps to tell them they're coming to your clinic. So we can product knowledge them there and explain to them the program and make the call so that they get the ride back. But we just have to extend it that extra hour, right? Because
2 hours, yeah, roughly.
Because the last, nobody's coming there.
With the Connect, and it's a great program, but you can't call, and even though it's on demand, you can't call and say, can I get a ride at noon? They're asked to call 24 to 48 hours in advance.
Well, they could call when they make the appointment. Can't they call when they make the appointment with you?
They can call, but to call with the Connect, they want 48 hours in advance. Well, some of our older veterans that can't drive, that's great, but some of these,
Right, but
You don't know where they're gonna be in 48 hours or 20.
Is it a maximum of 48 hours? So when they make the appointment to come in, because it's urgent care, so they don't always have appointments.
That's what,
Saying?
yeah.
Okay, because I would think that you would be teaching them that when they're captive at your place, and so this is the stuff that you could be letting them know.
Well, I think Celestina too isn't she a veteran?
Not any longer. She's no longer there.
Who's running the show over there?
They had
Wesley
Troy,
Tucker.
but now we have a new.
Wesley. Yeah, and that was a starting point.
Yes.
When I first got elected. I mean, that's where they would go to get their bus passes.
Yes, and that's still a place where they would go. So we've been partnering with them. We do, and not that they can get online all the time, but we do have our own social media that we would put out. We would put signs up all over the clinic. They're still showing up at the old clinic, even though we've been there over a year now. And we've had signs up over there for the ShastaConnect run. If you need a ride because the bus drops them off and we're closed, and we've been closed for over a year, there's signs up over there. Call this number, we'll try to get it. So yeah, it's an educational opportunity.
What is the lead time? So if I have an appointment at the VA, how early can I call to set up my ShastaConnect appointment?
I'm passing, ShastaConnect better than me.
So roughly 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
As far out as it goes in terms of appointments and everything, in terms of that service for what people can do.
I think, Tanissa, I'm thinking of a demographic that is not capable of that.
I'm not thinking of them, but the office.
Us and-
I was
yeah.
just thinking like at the office when I make the appointment for you, but it's not likely. Sometimes it's a month out, I'm sure. It's not that consistent.
I wish we'd make an appointment in 2 weeks.
Yeah, right? Yeah, that's unrealistic.
At the same time, a veteran that's in your home that can't drive, wants to go to lunch one day, I mean, you're not gonna set up a 24 hours ahead of time. I think
Right.
I wanna go to lunch tomorrow, so I mean, that would be where if there is a bus route there, they could go to the store, go to the lunch.
Sounds like we need both.
And grab a few and come back into town. Like it's.
Yeah, so I just asked Chuck there too to look at it. I think we can do some early analysis if that's what, if one of the items, because SS Tech has that as a recommendation to look at. It does sound like though it's going to take a little bit of time because Robin needs the time to be able to, figure out what a route looks like. What does that cost look like? Test it to see how it works and everything. What I'm getting right now is it might need through the summer to actually come up with that. We might be able to look at some options to propose early on, maybe in June, as some things that we could consider as maybe possible fund sources or what's available to try out to go for. But then maybe later, then once Rabba has a chance to look at that, because we also, if we're going to do something, we have to figure out how to make sure there's no conflict between both that type of an express route as well as the on-demand. That's going to need some coordination as well with DHCL as the operator of the service to see. So maybe by this fall, September, October, we might be able to come up with a solution is what I'm getting right now. So something we can study and look at.
But we are also recommending that we're extending hours starting July 1.
Right.
To,
Initially.
for ShastaConnect.
ShastaConnect, yeah.
And doing more education. So we're looking to, do what we can until Rabba's contractor is able to determine like what could be.
Government.
And also what other.
Is that the wheels turn it off?
Because of the one-time funding. The one thing that we need to clarify with what Jessica said is that is rural funding.
Right, it's not.
We're lucky that it sits in a rural area, based on the census designation. But that is, that money right now is under contract with Shasta County Public Works. So that there's
There's a lot
it's a
of.
good idea and we need to just flush it out.
Is there a way, Chuck, that it would also incorporate the airport? Because it's right there. Like, and it could be a route that drops you
You
with.
can run a bus anyway, right? It just takes time to figure out, A, how you're gonna run it, but B, more importantly, I think, and what's gonna take more is the coordination amongst the agencies, what money you're gonna use, how you're gonna use it, which agency is gonna pay for it or not, because the way that RABA works is paid for by everybody depending on what jurisdiction you're in at the time. So you're going through multiple jurisdictions to get there, going through the county, the city. It's gotta be sort of developed and figured out what the funding is, but I think we likely have a vehicle, and I don't know, drivers are a little short, but we can get something started. I think we got to get a plan together as to how it would work.
So in our overall work program, sorry, Chuck, I cut you off. I apologize, sir. But in our overall work program, I mean, can we?
That is in there.
Sort of put some.
There's a SB Senate Bill 1 funding. It was one of the new work elements that was put in there was to look at some of these services.
I mean, just sooner than later. We just got to get after this. This is something we can't, it's not okay to not push full tilt all hands on deck, make it happen.
Yep, we hear you.
That's my,
All right, let's move on.
I think we got to do something.
We need a motion to approve these 6 items. Is it a motion to approve items 1 through 6?
I'll make a motion.
Tanessa, Amy, are you back?
Yep.
Vanessa's making the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that one.
And Mr. Gallagher seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimous.
Great presentation, ladies. Well done.
Item number 11.
It's me again. So this item is regarding the, item 11 is the low carbon transit operations program. We receive, this year we'll be receiving $433,000 or just over, and it's the responsibility of this board to determine how we're going to allocate that. We do a call for projects. RABA submitted a couple of projects, and we worked with Dignity Health Connect Living on the projects that they would also consider doing, such as the ones that were just mentioned in the last presentation. We recommend to the board that the board allocate the $234,000 plus to the ShastaConnect on-demand service for a 4th year, $142,000 to the ShastaConnect Consolidated Transportation Services Agency service expansion, and that does include increasing the hours to 5:30 Monday through Friday for ShastaConnect, and $66,000, just over $66,000 to the RABA all-electric van replacement local match. And with that, if there's any questions, I'm happy to consider them.
Don't look any of us in the eye.
Oh, I will.
My understanding is this electric bus doesn't require a commercial driver's license. Is that correct?
They do have the driver, they do have a certain type of commercial driver's license.
But without, it's a different type, and it would make it easier to staff it.
Yeah.
I think is the issue. So I think we're on the right track.
And that one is, right, that's for Bravo's electric buses.
Right.
Because of the size of the bus or because it's got a battery in it?
And number of capacity.
Smaller.
Okay, capacity driven.
Capacity.
Okay.
Yeah, commercial driver's license.
Under how many passengers?
With a driver, I think it's 12.
I think it's, sometimes it's 10 and 2. It's like wheelchair access as well.
12, 10 seats with 2 wheelchair positions.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's under the CPL threshold.
Right. Okay. More discussion on?
Nice play, John, from the back seat there. Well done.
You still be your man.
I need a motion on.
I just have to clarify that we're spending $330,750 on an all-electric van replacement. I'm curious what just a regular old bus costs of similar capacity.
I think that under this state contract, there are some that are out, I don't know if it's the same, configuration, but they're 70, 75,000 in older contracts. So they could have gone up with inflation now to 90. I'm making that number up, but like.
Yeah, but I'd take 90 in a second. Spend it. I'd buy the van.
For some vehicles that DHCL purchased.
Yeah.
In the past with some FTA 5310.
And we know that inflation has them up there, but still, I mean, I know I'm beating the dead horse. I know it's dead. I'm still beating it and I can't quit because we're talking about $230,000 more for a stinking van. It's not okay, people. That is not okay. That we won't be able to charge soon. So just for clarification, but I'll make the motion because I think you guys did a great job on your staff report. Thank you for a good staff report.
And
You're killing me, so
capital expenditures doesn't affect the fare box because they don't calculate it. Is that correct?
Correct.
That's great.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second
Chris,
Mr. Gallagher's motion.
Amy, we have Mr. Gallagher.
Bury the horse.
Second by Mr.
Not having it, Jimmy.
You have that, Amy?
Yep, I got it. Thank you.
All right, I'll call for the vote, please. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries, Amy. Number 12, Sean.
All right, thanks, Chair. This agenda item 12 is to follow up on 2 items that got brought up at the prior board meeting. Related to discussions about meeting frequency as well as information about transportation funding programs. On April 7th, the Fiscal Policy and Management met to discuss those two items that have been brought up at the prior meeting. In regards to meeting frequency, SRTA's bylaws specifically identify the agency's meeting schedule, which I've included the appropriate section there in the attachment A, SRTA Article 4 meetings and bylaws. So state specifically that our board meetings are now held on the last Thursday of the month, in the months of February, April, June, October, and December. Additionally, the bylaws specify that the chair or majority of the board or the director, by notifying the chair, can call for special meetings or emergency meetings if they come up or are needed on a regular basis. In terms of the current meeting schedule, it is very consistent with what other smaller metropolitan planning organizations and their same activities are that we have on our schedule. It does match well with federal and state deadlines for regularly occurring planning and programming activities that we embark on and complete for the region, as well as various grant application cycles. On that effort, we are keeping track of different activities to say, okay, as new programs come up or new transportation bills take place, they start adjusting a lot of deadlines for grants and things, then maybe they might prompt the need to adjust and or add meeting schedules. That hasn't happened yet so far that we've seen anything in terms of the meeting frequency. So I haven't found anything where it's like, hey, we need to update our bylaws, add a Denver meeting date of another month or something to continue to meet more frequently. One of the other items also is we have to make sure included as part of that. The board has a standing technical advisory committee that we meet with 2 weeks prior to our board meetings to receive input from the TAC on all the different items we present to you, as well as to discuss the projects and activities, and to reach consensus on various staff recommendations that we have as well. So that plays into our scheduling of meetings and the time that takes place for those. One of the other things discussed during the Fiscal Policy Committee meeting to talk about meeting frequency was also just about the fact that we've got over half of our board is newer, which is typically not what we've seen in the past as well. And that there's a desire also to make sure we are keeping our board members educated and updated on the various programs, the policies, and fund sources that are there, as well as SRTA's roles and responsibilities for the region and activities that take place with that, including those that are infrequent that happen for us only every 2 or 4 years a cycle. Through the discussions during fiscal and policy, it was suggested that we consider looking at maybe providing short informational, what I would call workshops, during regular meetings that we already have on schedule, rather than necessarily doing some larger 2-hour workshops that are spread throughout. And in discussions, a couple items that came out during the fiscal policy discussion, and I'll let the members also talk about that, was the idea of starting the board meeting slightly earlier to accommodate that, as well as having it where we tailor the workshops to address one or more items typically on the meeting agenda, or depending on the upcoming meeting agenda, if we've got a variety of items related to.
Could we just send Mr. Gallagher a half hour early and then the rest of us wouldn't have to come?
Well, I can meet with Mr. Gallagher a half hour every week if you'd like.
No, we've got training. We want to talk about the federal transportation funding. I think 2:30 is reasonable. I don't think we need more meetings. I think move them up. And so we have the training session, certainly in front of the meeting, and then we have our regular meeting where we invite the public.
Public would.
I would say the whole meeting would be for the public and available. But what we have is the focus. I mean, we have a specific session, which we talked about, that this is the focus initially. Then we would go into all the regular agenda items of consent and regular agenda there for action items and everything.
If the whole board's here, it is a public meeting.
Right.
Regardless, yeah. And it's keeping up with the acronyms as half of it. I'll admit it. Bless you for being so good with those rolling off your tongue, but they're hard to keep up with some days.
Get you a sheet.
What the heck was that? You know.
He has an acronym sheet to get you.
But also, I mean, it's one thing to go, okay, that's low carbon, whatever, but knowing what that actually means when that's in a report and understanding that, and that the public, as importantly, is that the public would understand exactly what that means, because it's important to me that we have understanding.
Well, I'm willing to try it once or twice and then evaluate it.
Yeah, let's have a motion to
So are you recommending, Sean, that we just move meetings up from
3 to 2?
From 3 to 2:30?
Correct, yeah, so out of fiscal policy, what was recommended in the fiscal policy committee talked about was essentially the recommendation to move the meetings to 2:30 instead of 3. We would start that with the June board meeting and have a funding workshop that's there. I have proposed a couple different topics, but I'm always open to other topics that the board has.
Reasoning for moving it up, what,
The idea there for moving the meeting up was to allow for us to meet a little bit earlier to be able to discuss the desired topic for the workshop, rather than have an extended meeting that was later.
Training.
So
It's training.
So we're gonna have training at 2:30, not our regular meeting, or what are you talking?
No, it'd be all part of the regular meeting. So what we would do is we would start the meeting at 2:30. One of the first items, we do roll call in the initial couple things. Then one of the first items would be a workshop. The workshop would be the first part of that meeting. And then once the workshop was done, we would then go into the other items.
And what would be the workshop? Just
acronyms.
STIP.
So what we've talked about on the funding side, there's a desire to understand that various different funding programs are available. Chairman Mazzano mentioned also getting an update on what grants we've had for the region. So in this case, what I proposed in the June meeting, we would talk about the different funding that's available through our federal programs. What comes through in terms of planning funds, what are capital funds that come through, who's responsible and who's eligible. And the idea then October would be actually to talk about the Regional Transportation Improvement Program itself. What is its purpose? What does that schedule look like? Why is it important to the region? How does it tie the regional transportation plan and affect us as well as all of our local partners that we work with to program all of the different projects that they work on? And then talk about state.
During this time, you're just not gonna be talking about electric vans?
Nope.
All right.
Patrick, Henry.
All right, I make a motion to maintain the frequency, but yet start the meetings at 2:30 with the workshop in front.
Tim, can you second that?
I'll second that.
Amy, we have Mr. Kellstrom with the motion and Tim Garmin is going to second it. I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, Amy.
Wonderful, thank you.
Jim got in the game. I like it.
Okay, Sean doesn't like 13 for an agenda item, so we're going to move to 14.
It's been an ongoing kind of conspiracy here. So what can you say? On item 14, I'd like to introduce up for everyone is Kelly Timmons, Caltrans project manager. He's going to come up and talk about their Caltrans' 2023 project look ahead, the SB 45 report related to the Fixed 5 Cascade Gateway project, and the proposed state highway operations and protection program. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Kelly.
Thank you. Thank you, board. I'm going to stand if you don't mind. I've been sitting all day. I'm going to stretch my legs a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about SB 45 first. So if we go to the next slide. Hopefully you had a chance to see this already. I'm not sure if it's in your packet or not, but it looks like it is. I'm going to just discuss the changes that we've had since the last time we've presented the report. Just to note that the gray columns is a separate project. It's a shop project that Caltrans is funding. It's just there for information purposes only. The changes that we've had since the last report is under the community project funding, under the non-shop, we have been able to secure through Doug LaMaffa's office $3 million for the project for construction. Also, we are still looking for, as Sean mentioned, TSIP money for the third cycle. And we're hoping that we'll know within the next couple months if we will get that. And then also, we applied for some port funding.
Thank you.
Did you say pork?
Port, as in Humboldt Port.
Not that obvious.
Humboldt Port and creating a better transportation to and from the port to I-5. Yeah, and so it'll be here in Shasta County. Charging station. Not that we want to talk about charging stations.
Oh, come on.
Now you did it.
But for the big rig, you know, it's just a small part, but, you know, every piece of funding is good. And so, also, I wanted to know also that we have finished up the environmental section of the project, and we've moved into the design and the right of way.
So on this fixed 5 Cascade, the entire environmental process is complete? I mean, it was out of an EIR, the whole thing?
Yes, yep. Yeah, and so we've moved on to the design side. So those are the big highlights. You know, we are still, like I said, waiting for more funding. You know, if we can secure that, then we'll be able to move forward with the construction. And just want to reiterate what Sean mentioned earlier about the limits of the managed lane, you know, the truck only lane is essentially, you know, would be that transitioning around Hilltop. But by the time we get up to Hilltop, I'm sorry, 44, and then by the time we get up to Hilltop, it'd be the managed lane where it goes back down to 2, you know, we'd start there and then go up north. So,
and your plan all along was, you know, to get it designed and try to find funding along the way, and construction won't start until ultimately funding is secured.
Yeah, right. And we're hoping that that funding will come soon. You know, that I'm trying to remember what year this is supposed to be constructed in. Hold on for just a minute. It's supposed to be in 2025. So, you know, it's hopefully we'll have it by then.
Yeah.
So good. Any questions? On SB 45?
We're the first in the state to have this, I believe.
Right, we haven't found any other times when we've had a truck only lane on the inside. You know, we've seen them on the outside, you know, climbing lanes and different things, you know, Grapevine and going out past Barstow, going towards Vegas. You know, there's things like that. But on the inside, and it's essentially just to separate the through truck traffic from all that waiting that happens, you know, between, you know, Hilltop and up to 299.
It certainly reduces the accident picture.
Well, I hope so.
Well, but I would also argue, I mean, it does seem to be a little unusual that Caltrans would recommend a form of transportation that is inconsistent with anything that you've done in California. I mean, it's the getting truckers used to this would be like doing a square roundabout and asking the public to get used to it.
Right.
You haven't done this before.
We haven't. We have had some outreach to the trucking association, and they're in favor of it. They love the idea, you know, to be able to get them away from the traffic that's going in and out of all the.
Here's my fear is that, because we see it every day, that the fast lane being in the far right now becomes a trucking lane. All trucks go to that lane. There's going to be a slow truck. So now a fast truck will go to the center lane to pass. And now it eats up we have 2 lanes that are going to be used for trucking. And now the slow lane is where most of your smaller vehicle, small vehicles are going to end up. That's what I see because trucks are passing constantly. There's always a heavier one moving slower and a lighter one moving faster, and they're constantly moving around. And they don't care about the little cars.
So would it be a no passing section through there?
What's that?
Could you make that a no passing section?
We talked about that. That is an option we talked about. Is once you're in that lane, you stay in it. Because it is for through lane only.
Yeah.
And we're not necessarily getting striping as a solid white. And we're still trying to figure out those things in our traffic management group. But that was a concern we have had. The idea is that it is only once you're in that lane, you stay in that lane until it's done.
We had that discussion with his predecessor.
Yeah,
Eric. Controlling the egress.
Yeah. Right.
But you're asking these truckers that are going to be in normal lane 1 and 2 in a very short time period to move over to the far left lane, and then in a short time period move back to the slow lane. I don't think they're going to do it.
But you're not gonna get funding for it without it, because they're not gonna have any lanes for cars.
I agree, but I hate.
So the real question is, if we get the funding and we get the 3 lanes and, we get the project on, and then it is a disaster, I mean, it's just too complicated. Any chance that once we get the road built, that we can just revert it back to the way it's normally is?
I'll say that out loud.
We don't want to say that, but there are other options.
I said, is there any chance? I didn't say we're gonna do it.
You should run for office.
we'd be looking at other options, like maybe extending it.
Okay.
Yeah, instead of just having a short amount, maybe extend it further south,
Yeah, start it at Costco and get
possibly.
them
Yeah.
in front of the
There's a lot of
casino.
different options we've looked at. It's.
I think the truckers would love that.
I do too.
My experience with them, and believe me, used to catch them out in the fast lane all the time when I was pushing the black and white. They like being out there. Why? Because the road's better shape.
Yeah.
And they're not getting beat up. And they
They're
don't
in
like,
the fast lane now,
well,
every day. I see them every day.
that's a good ticket, let me tell you.
I drive I-5 every day and they're in the fast lane now. Now they're gonna be in lane number 2 going around. That's what's gonna happen.
We do allow them to move over up here now. They're allowed
We do
to.
allow them in the middle lane right now. They're allowed in the middle lane so that they're not in the number 3 lane coming through like Cypress and 44.
Uh-huh.
You know, and so that they can stay away from that weaving as much.
I think that's a really brilliant sign. Just, I'll go around you.
Isn't the ultimate ideal to have a flyover at the beginning and the end so they don't have to merge?
We had talked about that a little bit as an option, but you know, the cost is.
Cost is high, but that's the ideal.
Well,
You have a big
if we
sign
were
that
in the Bay
says,
Area or LA, that probably would be something we could do, you know, with the traffic volumes, but up
Yeah, we don't have it up here.
yeah, it's
And what do you think the
it's not
total,
feasible.
what was the total cost of this at completion roughly?
I was not prepared to answer that question. It's right here. Non-shop is 77 million. So,
It's today. We're not doing it until 25 and it'll be more.
100. I call it 100.
well,
But I like
that's our escalated
Right.
cost.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But we would expect to have to pay, you know, whether it's being built, so.
I think it'd be a great project for Shasta County
Yeah.
and Reading. And that, because that is just cars that can be treacherous in some of those merging situations.
Could we do that lane dedicated electric vehicles only?
That's a separate one.
Ask Mike.
He's coming after you today.
Yes, I'm good. I'm good with it. You bring it, Patrick Henry.
I'm gonna leave that for you guys to discuss.
Thank you. That's, I'm happy.
Yeah. All right, if no other questions, we'll move on to the other projects. Next slide, please. Okay, so I've broken down, you know, the type of projects. I'm not gonna hit every single project, but I did want to touch on about 4 different subjects here. Paving, active transportation or multimodal, bridges and EMS. Just go ahead and go to the next slide. Some of these will overlap as well. So I just picked one of the categories and put it in there. You know, they may overlap into others. Right now, currently, we have a couple large paving jobs that are in construction already. O'Brien Cap M and Burney Cap M. O'Brien's up north of Pitt River Bridge to Lakehead, and then Burney is from Hatchet Mountain Summit to Burney Mountain Power Road down into Burney. And both of those are in construction. They're expected to be complete by next year sometime. In the future, you know, coming soon is Burney Falls pavement, which is Highway 89, north of 299 to Lake Britton Road. Next slide.
Can I, sorry, that, I believe CAPM is a.
Cap M?
CAPM means what?
It means,
You're just grinding off an end or the top cap? What's,
it's capital pavement, capital maintenance, yeah.
capital main?
Yeah, capital maintenance. And so it's essentially what we're doing is sometimes we do mill and fill where we'll mill off, you know, maybe a couple inches and then fill it. You know, and you know, if we're worried about finished grade, like if there's curbs or gutters and different things, you might mill it first and then come back to the same elevation as what was before.
Mm-hmm.
If we're not concerned about that, a lot of times we just put a, you know, on top.
A lift over the top.
Lift over the top.
Okay.
And it's instead of doing a whole rehabilitation, you know, the pavement isn't needing a whole rehabilitation where we have to go in and dig out everything. We can still get another, you know, 10, 15, 20 years out of, you know, the paving, you know, with the CAPM projects. So, good question. So this slide here, some more projects that are coming down the pipeline here is Lake Boulevard paving. That's a nice one. We're finishing up design this year in June. So we'll be looking at going out to bid early fall. What's nice about Lake Boulevard is it's essentially paving from North Market Street, 273 out to Wilson Way. And we're going to be adding or improving the bike and ped path along the south side of the road there. And while I'm working with John, now that he's on board, to look at putting in 3 bus stops between North Market Street and I-5 as well. So, and then Cascade Shop, Fix 5, we've talked about that a little bit already. That's scheduled for construction in 2025. Shingle Station paving and drainage, dear to my heart since I live in Shingletown. It's paving from proper Shingletown area all the way to the Shasta County line up to the old station.
Are you saying we're gonna see more Shingletown projects?
Yeah.
Not necessarily.
What's
no.
wrong with that?
The right answer is no, not any exorbitant amount of projects.
That would be the political answer. Yeah.
Moving on. The next slide, please. There we go. Complete streets, active transportation. We have South Market Street ADA that's just finishing up. We've had some delays with the weather the last few months, but we just need to finish up the wall and I think do some striping and we're going to be done with that hopefully by June.
The wall's cool.
What's that?
The wall is cool.
Yeah.
I just hope the mountain behind it doesn't come down.
Well, that's why the wall's there.
Okay.
So the wall's there too.
It's pretty. I like it with the bicycles.
Yeah. Middle Creek Trail Extension is a great connection. We have Middle Creek Bike Trail that goes from the Sacramento River Trail out to Middle Creek, going towards Old Shasta. It terminates at Middle Creek Road, and it doesn't go all the way into Old Shasta. The bikers have to get onto 299 and make their way up. This trail extension will go from that termini to 2nd Street next to Jay's Market. And so you'll be able to get right into Old Shasta with that project. And that one, we're looking at finishing up design this fall and, putting out.
That'd be cool.
For next year.
Awesome.
That would be cool.
Yeah, I met with the Biking Association. I'm not sure which one it was, it was a year ago in May, during Bike Month. And we rode out there and did a little presentation, rode back, and they're very excited, to have that built. Just a little plug, to keep in mind is we do need to find, not just us, Caltrans, but, everybody needs to, there's a lot of push to get the trail from Old Shasta all the way to Whiskeytown. And so keep that in your minds, when you're thinking about projects. Be nice to be able to see that all the way to Whiskeytown. I used to live out in Old Shasta on the highway when I was in junior high and used to bike up and around that area. And traffic's a lot worse now than it is back in the 80s.
You can see me riding a bike out there like that on that road. Put a bike lane there and I might do it.
Yeah. So back in the 80s, we used to go up and down 299 to Whiskeytown all summer long. Not anymore though. I wouldn't trust my kids to go out there. East Palisades, Class 1 bike path. We have the existing bike path that go from that is on 44 across the river. It goes to East Palisades and then terminates. Behind. I'm not sure which big store that is, but it's on it's North 44 on just behind the big box stores, and we're gonna extend that path on Caltrans right away following I-5 northbound from that place, from that termini, going underneath Hilltop and past the Highland Park and connect to the next trail just south of Boulder Creek.
So you're gonna do a tunnel under?
No, we're gonna be between the abutment and the pier on the bridge of Hilltop. We'll just, so they'll be separated from the traffic, and we'll make sure stay with barriers and stuff when they're close to the highway. But most of the time they're going to be up a little bit higher and separated, or, you know, some drainage or ditches, or not ditch, low areas where they'll be down there away from the motor vehicles. And so, you know, that's a great, we're in planning. We're just finishing up the planning document for that. So that construction is not until 2027, but there's a lot of great support for that project. It connect from the hilltop area all the way up to 299 and you know, all the way out to Bethel Church or their campus or you know, the college even. Downtown Reading CAPM, you know, that one, I also put in California Street Bikeway, which is a City of Reading project. We're going to be doing a CAPM paving job from highway, on Highway 273 from Buenaventura Boulevard up to the junction I-5, you know, very end of 273. And there's going to be a lot of reconfiguration of like downtown Pine Street with the biking and so forth, you know.
What do you mean by reconfiguration?
We're looking at putting in 2 lanes on Pine Street and then, you know, similar to California Street and have biking lanes.
That'll make Mike happy.
So,
Yeah.
what's that?
That'll make Mike happy.
So, you know, there's
Electric bikes, because it's a hill.
I've hunted on an electric bike. The technology is amazing.
yeah. So, I also put California Street Bikeway in there because we are, Caltrans is providing $2.87 million financial contribution to the City of Reading to construct their project on the 273 part of California Street. And so, you know, we're in the process of finishing up the programming document for that. The next slide. Bridges. We have Shasta, Lake Shasta viaducts. Construction will start in 2025. It's I-5 north of Turntable Bay. Sweetbriar Bridge deck. These next 3 are in planning still. They haven't been programmed. Sweetbriar Bridge deck is at Sweetbriar off-ramp, on-ramp area. The overhead pass on Sweetbriar, it will be redone the deck. That's construction in 2027. We have Whiskey Creek deck replacement. It's the large bridge that goes across Whiskey Town Lake. We're looking at replacing the girders in the deck on that bridge. And that will be 2028 for construction. And then Pitt River Bridge construction, we don't know. You know, we got a lot of work to still do.
What is the viaduct now?
The viaduct? Yeah. Shasta Lake Viaduct, it's similar to like a bridge on I-5 north of Turntable Bay. You know, there's a bridge there that, you know, or what we call a viaduct that we're going to be working on. So,
The Pitt River Bridge, that'll probably be your most expensive project that you've done in Northern California.
yeah, I would say so. You know, we're looking at, you know, preliminary, you know, $1 billion or more. Wow. So, yeah, it's up there. Interesting. I mean, we had a great presentation. Sean was at the super regional meeting. Catherine Lowe, who's our project manager on that project, it's kind of more of a specific. It's going to take her full time to manage that once it gets going. And you know, she gave a great presentation, and you know, the depth of those piers, you know, are just huge. You know that are there already, but that they were built before the lake was filled back in the late 30s, early 40s, and we just can't, technology wise and cost wise, it'd be not feasible to try and put piers in the lake at this point. You know, so we're looking at a suspension bridge. The suspension bridge is the type of bridge like the Golden Gate Bridge is, where we'd have the abutments or support piers on each end, and then have, you know, the cables and everything to support the deck. So it's going to be a huge effort, a lot of money and a lot of good people working on it to get that going.
Traffic delay.
But as in construction and dollar amounts and everything else, it's too early to really tell us. We know that we do have a deadline though. It's 2039 or something like.
2039, 2040.
Yeah, somewhere around there. That's when our lease runs out with the Bureau of Reclamation. So we have to have a solution and, have it figured out before then. So. Next slide. TMS, traffic management systems. I think, yeah. And that essentially it's the, what we use to manage our traffic, like, loops and, different types of monitoring. And so we have a couple that are going to construction, soon here. They're getting ready to, they're being advertised at this moment. Loopy, and what we call Loopy at Highway 273 and 44 different various locations. We're putting in loops for the traffic signals, and then the inductors, similar type of situation on Highway 299, Eureka Way, essentially Buenaventura to Court Street. And then there's some other TMS work that we're doing. We have another job that's in planning right now, Shasta Valley ITS, where we're putting in like different monitoring systems, like weather. I'm not even sure what all of them are, because I haven't been involved with the planning part, but it's various locations all along I-5 for the most part. And then, we're a lot of Caltrans people are working on middle mile broadband. I don't know if you've heard of that, all of you, but Caltrans is involved with, trying to put in broadband in different locations throughout just the whole state. And we've been involved with that as well. Next slide. That might be it, actually. Yeah. Any questions? All right. Thank you.
Much.
All right.
Moving on, number 15, Sean.
Thank you, Chair. Item 15, Sean Shepherd, Caltrans Asset Manager, is going to give a presentation on the draft 2023 State Highway Safety Management Plan. So, Sean?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair, Board. I'd like to stand as well, if you don't mind. So we were talking earlier about education. I'm going to give you a quick overview, particularly in light of the time. I know it's getting late, but I'd like the board to understand the significance of asset management, which has come along in the last 5 years, 6 years. So I'll just kind of run over some high points so that you can get a big picture. So we'll move ahead with that. Next slide, please. Acronyms. Quite a few different ones here. SHSMP is the State Highway System Management Plan. It's a plan that Caltrans develops biannually, and every 2 years, on odd numbered years, we develop a new 10-year plan. The previous plan, of course, overlaps since you do it every 2 years and it's 10 years long. So things are always coming toward you and you add 2 new years at the end of each time. So you're always looking out in the future. And this is an ongoing, updated, every 2-year plan, and it drives a lot of what we do. Assets and performance objectives are what they sound like. Assets are simply anything that Caltrans is responsible for owning and maintaining. We have a lot of different kinds of things. Pavement, bridges, drainage, and transportation management systems are the top 4. But there are actually 34 different performance objectives included in the State Highway System Management Plan. Some of them are directly related to physical assets. Others are sort of general goals that are measured in different ways. So we have, I think I put a few examples here of a few other kinds of things that are included in that for which we have performance objectives. Little things like signs and lighting, up to significant things like rest areas and the like. One new development I just want to highlight here, Complete Streets is something that historically the State Highway Operation Protection Program, the SHOP, which is most of our budget in the North State, was not previously allowed to spend money on these things. And since Senate Bill 1 back in 2017, They have revised a lot of the law and the policy that allows us now to meet some of those needs in multimodal ways. So it's really important that we're context sensitive. In the North State, things are spread out. You know, I drive everywhere. Yeah, I like to ride my bike. But we now have more flexibility than we used to for building facilities that make sense at each location. So that's something that's been a positive development. Performance targets are something that is assigned from headquarters to each district. We're in District 2, which is the 7 northeastern counties, right? Modoc, Siskiyou, Trinity, Shasta, Tehama, Lassen, Plumas, and we have a little piece of Sierra 395 as well. So that's District 2, and in our district, we have all these lane miles and all these bridges that we're responsible to maintain. For each of the 34 performance objectives I mentioned earlier, there's a performance target given at the beginning of each new 10-year plan. Every time we reset, update the State Highway System Management Plan. And there's funding that's tied to those performance targets. They say, you will deliver this much performance. And what is performance? Performance is talking about the condition of an asset, and we say it's either good, fair, or poor. And you have to move that asset, take some action that changes the condition of that performance objective from either fair or poor to good. That's the bottom line. So big picture wise, we've identified our inventory and our assets. We've assessed it for condition. And then based on the unconstrained need, there's some subset of that where we say, well, here's what realistically we can afford to do statewide. And money is distributed in association with those targets based on the projected and desired outcome, which will accept some fair and poor each cycle, but we're trying to close that gap and reduce that, gaining on it each cycle, bringing the total condition of the entire system into better and better condition each time. So that's a big picture of what asset management is about.
You want to come to work for the county?
Well, I'm pretty busy. I don't have a lot of time after I finish this job.
On the weekends, right, Sean?
On the weekends, right? Out of those 10 years, we're currently in the 2021 State Highway System Management Plan. The first 5 years starts with 21, 22. It's by fiscal year, of course. Those are projects that are already in design or going out to construction. So when we talk about planning beyond that, we're talking about the last 5 years of the 10-year plan. So right now, my last 5 years are between 26, 27 and 30, 31. And all those years in between, those are the things, that's how far down the road we're anticipating the condition, because we look into the future and we have degradation curves. We look, hey, when is that pavement gonna need work again? Because if you wait until it's already fallen apart, you're way too far behind the ball. I'll just mention this asset management tool. This is a database developed by headquarters. You can imagine what that's like, but it's getting better all the time. And it allows us to keep some track of what our assets are, what their condition is, and when we plan to do what work. Next slide, please. So I've talked about a lot of this already, but basically you have to know what is out there, what we're responsible for, what shape it's in, how fast it's fallen apart, what do we need it to look like later, and how are we going to get there? And that's where those targets come in. Of those last 5 years, our advanced planning unit takes years 6 and 7 of those 10, and that's the projects for which we develop our project initiation documents. That's what we're dealing with right now in advanced planning, finishing everything up by the end of this fiscal year. So we have a couple dozen kids right now that are about to be signed by the end of June that will be they will constitute the new projects when the CTC amends them into the 2024 SHOP, or State Highway Operation Protection Program. So it's a lot of work ahead of time so we know what happens at that time. We do track throughout project development. We track what we think we're going to do, and then as you learn about the project and you're developing it and you get more detail, sometimes what you need to do, you realize, oh, okay, that doesn't make as much sense, or we learned something new, or some risk is realized. And you revise the scope and refine it until you know exactly what needs to happen. And so we're tracking that throughout the project development process so that we know that we're gonna get what we intend at the output end. So all the way through design and construction, even the end of construction, we're closing that loop back in and going, what actually got built? Did it meet what we expected? And how does that affect the future need? So it's a complete cycle that we go through. Next slide, please. This is too much to grasp if it's the first time you've seen it, but it's an attempt that I've made to demonstrate how the every 2-year update of that 10-year plan, how it works. Right now, this today line, see, we're getting pretty close to the end of the 22-23 fiscal year. In July, we're gonna roll over to the new 2023 State Highway System Management Plan. There's a draft out for public consumption right now, but we don't know yet, believe it or not, what our targets are gonna be when it rolls over yet. I won't get those probably for another month from headquarters. So I'm making a lot of assumptions based on the size of the budget and what I know about the condition of our system. And then there'll be refinement right there in the beginning of July within the district where we're all talking to each other and going, okay, here's what we actually got and here's how we're gonna meet it. Because that first quarter following the beginning of July, we're gonna have to compose an entirely new program, much of which will roll over from before, but there'll be revisions based on what the new targets are and the funding that's available. That stands to reason, right? So that's an update process. There's more detail I can pull out here, and I'd be happy to entertain questions at any point. Just stop me. And if you're looking at this later or anytime, you can send me an email, give me a call anytime. Happy to discuss details and how this stuff works with anybody who wants to know. Before I go to the next slide, are there any questions about this particular component? Next slide, please. This is a quick look at the draft projects that will roll over into the 23 10-year plan. So it's pretty hard to see on this slide. Kelly actually touched on a number of these, some things that are coming kind of down the pipeline, and then there's some stuff that's even further out. You can see under the activity categories, which is the primary thrust of the work, we have a variety of projects addressing bridge health, the condition of drainage systems, various areas of pavement, a variety of transportation management systems, which are not, sometimes are more exciting than inductive loops for detecting vehicles. We have CCTV cameras so we can see, hey, how much is it snowing on that pass? Can I get home tonight? That kind of thing. Helpful stuff. So there's a variety of projects that are coming forward, and this is subject to revision again based on revised targets from headquarters, and there's some cutoff where the funding we go, okay, this is what we can afford to build this time around. I think that was my last slide. We can go to the next one if there's. Yeah.
Of course. There you go.
Any questions?
Very thorough, thank you.
No,
Okay, thanks. Reach out anytime you have questions about.
thank you.
Thanks, John.
Item 16 is the suggestions from board members relative to potential topics for a future board meeting.
Our hours back to 3 o'clock.
You go ahead and come in at 3, Patrick.
I have not.
I did, I'm gonna, true to my word, Rob, I did ask a question to study on how the funding for the high-speed rail will be affecting our budgets in the future and what the subsidies are likely to be. That's kind of a pared down version of, I didn't articulate it that well, but it is going to affect us. It's going to affect the rest of the state, and all our small jurisdictions are going to be affected by that. And even, My concern is they're going to force us to build some kind of connectivity to that. That's going to change our whole plan, as we just saw. So I don't know if it works in the overall work program, but I'd like to see some information on what our projections would be on what that's going to do to our local funding for streets and roads mostly, but overall it'd be fine.
It's definitely something we can look into and see, and maybe that could be something as one of our workshops when we talk about funding. And give us some time to actually see what impact that may have or may not have on us based upon what's actually funding and what the state has set aside to fund high-speed rail, so.
I mean, that we should just start the bridge project on the Pitt River Bridge, because that's what they did with the high-speed rail. They didn't have any of it figured out. They just started building it. So maybe we could do that with the Pitt River Bridge.
We only get halfway across the lake.
Patrick has a question, then we're going to move to closed session.
Well, I mean, we've talked about a lot of things today, including expanding transit, and it just seems to me that over the last, 4 or 5 years, that ridership numbers are declining, and yet we're wanting to expand. The state clearly wants us to expand public transportation, but yet our trends are declining. And so here, we're going to be spending more money and less ridership, and I'm just, it just does not seem like good governance. And I know the state's going to continue to push on that and send money, and we're going to accept those things, but yet ridership continues to go down. And then we struggle to answer questions with regards to a particular route for veterans, which just seems, kind of somewhat crazy that can't be addressed, and yet ridership tends to be possibly going up where everything else going down. So to me, it's a fundamental problem that I don't think ridership is going to improve. I think these trends have been ongoing for quite some time, and I think they're going to continue to go that way. And I don't see the growth. If we had projections of growth within the county where we would be at 2025 population, 225,000 population, maybe ridership would go up, but I don't see significant growth. And I see trends for public transportation in this area going down. But yet we're going to continue to spend even more money because that's what the state wants. So that's just my thoughts. Nothing to take action on, but.
So, Sean, I just wonder if we get any more people coming in, are we working on our technology to be able to have the meetings back at the county board?
So that is outside of the control of SRTA in terms of what the other facilities have or don't have that's available. That we will be able to talk about the next board meeting about, where we might want to meet. That's something we can look into and say what's available. But again, that's outside of the control of us and what we have and what's available. So that is something that we can look into and report back and talk about as we think ahead to the next year of meetings, because of the process. We said, okay, through here. So we will look at that and come back to you, and we can have a discussion on that one again.
This was a pretty packed agenda. We don't normally have them like that. And parking's free over here. Okay?
Well, that's a thought.
Yeah.
Maybe we could have an electric bus. We'll park here and then all ride over.
So we got to think about that. We'd like to move to closed session. It's next on our agenda. Thank you all for hanging out. We'll work on your situation.
Push on it.
Thank you.
Amy, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to hand it over to the chair.
Amy, we're going to come out of closed session and we do have reportable action and our attorney will.
Yes, the board appointed a ad hoc committee to assist in negotiations for the lease of the property with whatever it is, Sierra Pacific or Sierra.
Sierra Sacramento.
Yeah. You got it? Okay.
We need a
Being said,
motion
I
on
think
that?
Did we actually do the motion and?
No. Oh, do we need a motion? There's an agreement.
I think
No, we don't need a,
Well, the vote was a unanimous vote, but you don't need one for committee, but go ahead.
yeah, it was a unanimous agreement. We have to vote.
Nobody disagreed.
So we're adjourned.